Hello, and welcome. Whether you're listening late at night with heavy eyelids, or during a quiet moment of day, this gentle journey is here to lull you into comfort. Make yourself cozy. Feel the day's tensions release as you settle back. Together, we'll travel back over 1,000 years to the age of the Vikings, not with clashing swords or roaring seas, but with a soft and calming exploration of their world. This is Vikings. Beyond the Longships, a tranquil voyage through fjords and farmlands, myths and memories. Take a slow, deep breath. As you exhale, imagine the cool mist off a northern fjord on an early morning. Picture the way the first light of dawn touches the gentle hills and quiet waters. In this story, the noise and frenzy of battle fall away. Instead, we drift through scenes of daily life and wonder. We'll wander through green meadows, dotted with wooden farmhouses, hear hushed voices, sharing stories by the hearth, and gaze up at skies, alive with the aurora's glow. The time of day doesn't matter here. In our journey, the golden glow of a Scandinavian summer evening and the cozy darkness of a winter night are both at our fingertips. Let's begin by imagining ourselves standing on a peaceful shore in the land of the Vikings. The air is crisp and smells of salt and pine. Gentle waves lap against the rocks, each one slower than the last, like a natural lullaby. High above, gulls glide silently over cold, clear water. Behind us, the green slopes rise toward distant mountains. You might be sitting at home or lying in bed now, but a part of you can almost feel that cool breeze and hear the distant call of a horned owl echoing from the pines. Let all your worries drift out with the tide as we set forth on this slow adventure into the past. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore different facets of Norse life, from how the turning of seasons guided their days, to the warmth of a longhouse filled with family and friends. We'll listen in on old myths whispered by the fire, watch master craftsmen build elegant ships, and travel with explorers on calm seas to new shores. We'll meet wise poets and prophetesses, sit among farmers at a community gathering, and witness how the old ways gently yielded to new beliefs. Through it all, we will move at a leisurely pace. There's no rush at all. Let each word paint a picture in your mind, and feel free to close your eyes and simply listen, allowing the images to drift in like a soft fog over the fjords. Now that you're comfortable and relaxed, let's step fully into this serene voyage through Viking history. Our first chapter begins with the land itself, the beloved homeland of the Norse people, with its deep fjords, blooming summer meadows, and long, snowy nights. We'll feel the rhythm of their seasons and how the natural world guided their lives. So, settle in, breathe deeply, and let the gentle sounds and sensations of the Viking world carry you onward. Land of fjords and seasons. Imagine the north, a vast expanse where the natural world is powerful and ever-present. In the Viking homelands of Scandinavia, nature wasn't just a backdrop, it was the very fabric of life. Think of a deep fjord at twilight in summer, steep cliffs draped in green plunge into calm, mirror-like water. The sky above is painted with streaks of rose and gold, for in the far north, the summer sun lingers late, barely dipping below the horizon. During these long summer days and endless twilights, the world feels gentle and illuminated, as if dusk itself lasts for hours in a state of quiet enchantment. In contrast, winters here can be long and hushed. Picture a soft blanket of snow covering rolling hills and forests of evergreen. The fjord's waters steam faintly in the cold, and the sun, low on the horizon, even at midday, casts a pale glow over a landscape at rest. The Norse people knew these rhythms intimately. Their year was essentially divided into two main seasons: a bright, busy summer half and a dark, still winter half. Each season had its own gifts and challenges, and the Vikings adapted their lives to this cadence of light and dark, warmth and frost. On a clear summer morning, farmers woke early to the first light, which might come as early as 3 or 4 o'clock, with birdsong drifting through the cool air. The meadows would be moist with dew underfoot. In the distance, snow still glitters on mountaintops, but down in the valleys, wildflowers sway gently. You can hear the faint clanging of bells around the necks of sheep and goats grazing on the hillside. Summer was a time of abundance. The growing season was short this far north, so every long day of sunshine was precious. Barley and oats had to be sown and harvested in a narrow window between frosts. Families worked together under the mild sun. Men, women, and children, all out in the fields, cutting hay or tending gardens. Laughter and chatter carried on the breeze as they labored, mindful to make the most of the generous daylight. The sun at these latitudes can feel different, more tender, never too harsh. Even at midday, it's warm and bright, but with a gentle quality to the light. As the afternoon stretches on, a pleasant coolness creeps back in. By evening, the sky becomes a canvas of soft pastel hues. In high summer, darkness never completely falls. Instead, you get a magical twilight, known as the white nights. The horizon glows in pearly light, well past midnight, and it's as if the land itself refuses to sleep. During these times, the Vikings might stay up late around outdoor fires, enjoying music or stories under a sky that never goes fully black. Now imagine the shift as the year moves toward autumn. The days shorten and a crispness enters the air. Forests blaze with color, birch and aspen turning gold, mountain ash berries shining red against deep green pines. The Vikings keenly observed these changes. They knew exactly when it was time to bring the livestock down from summer pastures and prepare for the coming cold. During the brief autumn, families busied themselves drying fish and meats, salting down provisions, and storing grain. Every task carried a sense of both gratitude and urgency, because they understood that the bright days were waning and the dark season was nearing. When winter finally arrived, it wrapped the land in quiet and snow. The first snowfall would come swirling down, whitening the rooftops of the farmsteads and frosting the stubble fields. Soon the fjords might freeze at their shallow edges, and lakes would don a sheen of ice. Nights grew long, incredibly long. In the heart of winter, near the solstice, daylight might be just a pale glimmer for a few hours, or in the far north, not come at all. But the darkness was not something to fear. It was a time for rest and reflection. Indoors, oil lamps and hearth fires glowed, casting dancing shadows on wooden walls. If you ventured into the crisp night outside, you might witness the aurora borealis, the northern lights, shimmering curtains of green and violet, quietly rippling across the starry sky. Many a winter night, a Viking family would step into the cold, breath steaming, to gaze up in wonder at those lights. They may have believed them to be dancing spirits or reflections of the god's armor, moving soundlessly overhead. During those long winters, life slowed down. People stayed close to home and to each other. The extreme cold and darkness forged a sense of communal warmth inside the longhouses. Families gathered around the central hearth, where a fire crackled and cast a steady heat. The smells of wood smoke, wool, and hearty stew filled the dim interior. In that cozy circle of light, they passed the hours with simple enjoyments. Children played quiet games, or carved little toys from scraps of wood. Adults mended clothes, sharpened tools, or worked on weaving and carving, all the while exchanging stories and jokes in relaxed voices. Storytelling was a favorite pastime in these months, when the fields lay dormant and travel was difficult. Elders would tell ancient tales of gods and heroes, or recount family histories, and younger listeners would lean in, faces flickering in the firelight, hanging onto every word. Though winter was cold and could be harsh, it had its joys too. The Vikings found ways to have fun and keep spirits up despite the weather. The frozen lakes and fjords became playgrounds. Bundled in furs, children and adults would skate across the ice using bones or iron-bladed skates, racing and gliding under the pale winter sun. They built snow forts and had friendly competitions throwing snowballs, laughing as they tumbled in the drifts. These playful activities not only entertained them, but also kept them physically fit and bonded the community during the season of enclosure. Even the gods of their myths had a place for winter fun. One of their deities, Ulla, was associated with skiing, indicating the importance of snowy pastimes in Norse life. The changing weather also brought out the Norse people's deep spiritual connection to nature. When fierce storms howled over the North Sea, or blizzards blanketed the farmsteads, they felt the presence of greater powers. In their beliefs, a god like Thor might be riding across the heavens in his thunderous chariot during a storm, or the wind could be the breath of Odin, the All-Father, sweeping over the world. To them, the natural elements were alive with divine force. Yet, they also sought comfort and influence over these elements through their faith. A farmer might step outside on a blustery day, face the grey sky, and quietly call upon Thor, or Njord, the god of winds and sea, to gentle the weather if a voyage was needed. It was common in sagas for people to invoke such gods when dealing with rough seas or biting cold, hoping for mercy and calm. The Norse had seasonal celebrations that showed how closely they watched the turning of the year. In the heart of winter, they celebrated Jol, what we know as Yule, around the time of the solstice. This was a festival of hope and warmth in the darkest part of the year. Families would gather for a great feast in the longhouse, sharing roasted meats, ale, and spiced bread. They lit candles or torches, symbolically pushing back the darkness, and probably decorated with green boughs of pine or fir brought inside. Story and song featured prominently in these celebrations. They may have burned a special log in the hearth all night to ensure the return of the sun's light, a custom that survives faintly in the Yule log tradition. While some of the later Christian writers tried to tie Yule to sun worship, Viking Age Yule was really about community and continuity, reinforcing the bonds among the living, and perhaps even inviting the spirits of ancestors to join in the merriment around the fire. As winter gave way to spring, there was a sense of quiet excitement. The first signs might be the drip of melting icicles and the soft trickle of thaw water running down slopes. Days lengthened noticeably. By the time the streams were flowing full with snowmelt and the willow trees budded with fuzzy catkins, people began preparing the fields again. They marked the start of the summer half-year with gatherings and rituals too. One such occasion was the Disseblot, a spring feast to honor guardian spirits and perhaps female deities or ancestors, asking for fertility and good fortune in the season of growth. This was a time when villagers might gather in a sacred grove at dusk, the ground soft with the first green shoots of grass, raising wooden cups of ale in a toast to the earth's awakening and to Freya and Freya, the gods of fertility, to bless the crops and herds. The year turned, and the cycle continued, a rhythm of life that the Vikings danced to in their own steady steps. Summer's hustle, fall's preparation, winter's rest, spring's hope. Each phase was distinct and cherished. They had no modern clocks or printed calendars, but they read the signs of nature expertly. The blooming of certain flowers, the migration of birds, the position of the sun and stars, all these were their calendar. They even named their months after the work to be done, or the natural events of the season. For instance, one late summer month was called Hayanir, meaning haymaking, marking the time to cut and dry hay. In their system, a year had 12 lunar months, which didn't perfectly match the solar year. So every few years, they added an extra leap month to keep the seasons aligned. Even without clocks, they ensured that important gatherings and celebrations stayed in tune with the solstices and equinoxes, the points when the balance of day and night shifted. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing with a Norse family on a cool spring morning. The long winter is over, the ground is soft and smells richly of earth. A farmer takes a seed in his work-hardened hand, makes a small prayer under his breath, and presses it into the soil. His wife and children stand by, faces calm but hopeful. Overhead, the sky is a pale eggshell blue, with sunlight gently spilling over the horizon. Birds sing from the birch trees that are just leafing out a tender green. There's a shared feeling of optimism, the promise that life will flourish again. The Vikings' whole existence was tied to these cycles of nature. By attuning themselves to the land's rhythms, they found stability and meaning. Each season brought its own beauty: the midnight sun and bursting life of summer, the fiery colors and crisp air of autumn, the hushed, starry enchantment of winter, and the fresh, reawakening energy of spring. This was their world, a land that could be at once bountiful and severe, illuminated by an almost endless sun at one time of year, and wrapped in profound darkness at another. Instead of resisting these extremes, the Norse embraced them. On long summer days, they rejoiced and labored with vigor under friendly skies. In the deep of winter, they drew close around the fire and let the tales and companionship warm them. They saw their gods in the wind and weather and wove their understanding of the universe around the pattern of seasons. In this way, the geography and climate of Scandinavia, the fjords, the forests, the auroras and storms, were not just scenery, but characters in the story of Viking life. As you breathe in now, think of the purity of that northern air and the calming steadiness of a community in tune with nature. And as you breathe out, feel yourself aligned with that slower, ancient rhythm. The land of fjords and seasons has shown us how the Vikings lived with patience and harmony in the embrace of their environment. The world outside their doors was at times fierce, at times gentle, but always respected. Our journey now will move from the grand, the scale of nature, to the small, everyday moments of Viking life. In the next chapter, we'll step inside a Viking village. We'll see what daily life was like in those clustered farmsteads, the routines of farming and crafting, the scent of baking bread and wood shavings from the carpenter's workshop, the sound of children's laughter and livestock's bleating, all the simple, human moments that made up the fabric of their existence. So let's leave the quiet fjord for now and walk up a grassy path toward the glow of a hearthlight peeking through the doorway of a longhouse, where a family's daily life awaits us. Village life and hearthside. Let us walk up the grassy path into a Viking village now. It's not a large town with busy streets, but a small cluster of farmsteads nestled in a green valley beside a gentle stream. A few wooden buildings with turf-covered roofs huddle together, smoke curling lazily from their holes or chimneys. Chickens cluck and peck around the dirt yard, and a couple of shaggy brown cows munch on hay in a pen. The morning air carries the homey smells of wood smoke and baking bread. As we approach one longhouse, we can hear the low murmur of voices within and the soft bleating of sheep coming from a nearby shed. This is daily life in the Viking Age. Humble, rhythmic, and deeply connected to home and family. Inside the longhouse, dawn's light filters through a smoke hole in the roof, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the warm air. The longhouse is the heart of the farm. It's a long, rectangular building made of timber or rough-hewn planks, with a roof insulated by layers of turf. Stepping through the wooden door, you find a single large room, perhaps with simple partitions for sleeping areas. A central hearth holds a small fire that was kept alive through the night. It casts a flickering glow on the rafters, where dried herbs, bundles of onions, and strips of smoked meat hang. The floor is packed earth covered in fresh straw. It feels warm and welcoming here, a refuge from the chill outside. The family is already up and about. The farmer, a stout man with a reddish beard, is sitting on a wooden stool by the hearth, carefully carving the handle of a new axe with his knife. His wife moves around him, tending to a clay pot that simmers over the fire. Breakfast porridge, bubbling gently and scented with barley and dried berries. She pauses to stir it with a wooden spoon, then drapes a wool cloak over the shoulders of a still sleepy child who has just woken and shuffled close to the fire. In one corner, an elderly grandmother is carding wool, pulling the tangles from a fluffy pile of sheep's fleece. Across from her, a young girl, maybe 10 years old, concentrates as she winds yarn onto a spindle, learning the art of spinning from her grandmother's patient example. All generations share this space and the morning's quiet tasks. Every member of the household has duties to greet the day. In Viking society, work was often divided by tradition, but everyone's effort was needed to keep the farm running. The women's world was centered around the home and farmstead. They were the keepers of the hearth and pantry. The wife of the farmer here, like most Norse women, oversees the cooking, the supply of food, and the making of clothing for the family. A large part of her day will be spent working wool into yarn, weaving that yarn into cloth, and sewing garments. Already, her skilled hands have produced the tunics and dresses the family wears. Sturdy, everyday clothes made of wool and linen, dyed in earthy hues of brown, green, or blue. From natural plant dyes, she also is brewing ale for the household in a wooden tub in the corner. You can smell the faint, sweet scent of fermenting barley. Brewing and baking are part of her weekly routine. This morning she has already baked flatbreads on a griddle over the fire, and their nutty aroma lingers in the air. The farmer, for his part, oversees the fields and livestock. Shortly after eating a simple breakfast together, warm porridge spooned into wooden bowls, maybe sweetened with a drizzle of honey, he will head outside to begin the day's labor. There are fences to mend, and perhaps a fishing net to haul in from the river where it was set the night before. His eldest son, a lanky youth, accompanies him, carrying a coil of rope. The boy's breath puffs in the cool morning as he trots eagerly at his father's side, proud to help, Together, they will hitch the 2 oxen to a wooden plough and turn the soil in a nearby field for spring planting. The plough blade is iron-tipped, crafted by the local smith, and it cuts through the earth with a crunching sound as clumps of dark soil roll aside. Birds follow behind them, darting in to catch worms and grubs unearthed by the ploughshare. The farmer calls out gentle words to his oxen, clicking his tongue and guiding them in steady furrows. Farming is the cornerstone of life here. Almost everyone in the village is involved in subsistence-level agriculture. They grow oats and barley for porridge and ale, rye or wheat for bread in some regions, and tend vegetables like cabbages, beans, and root crops in small gardens. Much of their work is to ensure there is enough food to last through the next winter. Elsewhere in the village, a few other figures are starting their day's work as well. Over by a lean-to shelter, the blacksmith has begun to hammer away at a piece of red-hot iron on his anvil. Tink, tink, chink. The sound is rhythmic and oddly soothing from a distance. Sparks fly like tiny stars as he shapes a new iron hinge for a door or perhaps a sturdy knife blade. The smith is a crucial craftsman in any Norse community. With hammer and tongs, he can repair ploughshares, forge nails and rivets for boat building, or create tools and weapons. Working at the forge was one of the few specialized jobs usually done by men. Not everyone had a full-time smith living locally, but larger villages often did, and traveling smiths might move between farms when needed. Near the smithy, a carpenter is sitting under the eaves, using a sharp hand axe and knives to carve the curved prow piece for a small boat. Wood shavings curl at his feet, and the fresh scent of cut oak perfumes the air. His hands work steadily, guided by years of practice as he follows the grain of the wood. Through the village runs a life of cooperation. Neighbors often help one another. One can imagine 2 women carrying buckets together on a yoke, walking to the stream to fetch water while exchanging the latest news and gossip in low voices. They pass the small byre where goats are kept. One woman reminds the other of the lost goat kid that wandered off last week, and they chuckle, recalling how they found it asleep behind a woodpile. Community ties are strong here. People rely on each other. If one family's roof was damaged in a storm, the others would gather for a roof-mending bee, replacing thatch or turf, and afterwards share a warm meal together in thanks. Inside the longhouse, the wife has finished the morning chores of milking the cow and goats, and now sits at her loom. The loom is a tall, upright frame, leaning against the wall, with threads weighted by smooth stones or clay weights at the bottom. As she moves the shuttle back and forth, the loom weights clack softly. Line by line, a woolen cloth is forming, perhaps a new blanket for the bed or fabric for a cloak. Weaving is time-consuming and requires patience. She hums a little tune as she works, the same melody her mother taught her when she was a girl learning to weave. Nearby, the grandmother continues to spin wool into yarn with her drop spindle, the wooden spindle twirling as she skillfully pulls and twists the fibers. The young daughter now helps by winding finished yarn into a ball. These domestic crafts are highly valued. Without them, the family would have no textiles for clothing or trade. We might notice that hanging on the wall is a large iron key on a ring. In Norse households, the wife often carried the keys to the food chests, the pantry, and the strong boxes. It was both practical and symbolic. To have the keys meant she was the mistress of the house, in charge of all the precious stores and supplies. In fact, at her wedding, a bride might be given a set of household keys, as a sign that she now manages her own home. This lady of the house is respected for her role. Though Viking society was patriarchal in many ways, women here enjoyed a degree of independence and responsibility within their sphere that might surprise outsiders. They could inherit property, especially as widows, and run farms. When the men were away on long trading voyages or raids, the entire burden of managing the farm fell to the women, and they were fully capable of it. If you step outside now, you might find the farmer's wife giving instructions to a thrall about feeding the pigs, or negotiating a trade of homespun cloth with a neighbor in exchange for a sack of flour. She speaks with confidence, accustomed to making decisions for the household. Let's talk a little about the thralls, the slaves or bonded servants who are also part of this world. Not every family owned thralls, but those who were better off or who had captured people in raids might have a few. In this farm, a young man and woman serve as thralls to the family. The young man is now hauling water from the stream, 2 heavy wooden buckets in hand, muscles straining but face impassive. The young woman thrall is in the corridif, byre, pitching hay to the animals. These thralls wear simpler, rougher clothing and do much of the hardest labor. They are up before dawn and are the last to finish chores at night. Thralls were at the bottom of society, and in law they were considered property. Some were people taken as prisoners on raids in foreign lands. Others might have been born into slavery if their mother was a thrall. But on a kindly farm, they might be treated almost like extended family, eating at the hearth with everyone, albeit the last to be served. One must remember that Viking society could be harsh. Thralls could be bought and sold, and they didn't have the freedoms that free folk had. Yet, many thralls did live and work closely with free households, and over time, some could even be freed for loyal service, becoming freedmen. On this farm, the thrall boy calls the farmer master and obeys promptly, but in the quiet moments, he jokes with the farmer's son. Perhaps they grew up together almost like foster brothers, unequal in status, yet bonded by daily life shared. We wander outside again to the sounds of the village. It's near midday now. The sky is high and blue. From one cottage drifts the hearty laugh of an old man carving a wooden bowl while chatting with a neighbor. 2 little boys chase each other around a stack of firewood, wooden swords in hand as they play heroes and trolls, their giggles piercing the calm. A tabby cat suns itself on a warm stone, blinking slowly at the world. The smells of the day's cooking begin to waft about. One household is smoking fish over a smouldering fire of birch wood. Another tends a pot of stew made with lamb, turnips, and wild herbs. In a shady spot beside the longhouse, our farmer's wife sits down with a basket of mending. She chats softly with the grandmother while patching a tear in her husband's tunic with careful stitches. The grandmother recounts a small bit of news. She heard from a traveller that the neighbouring village will host a assembly, in a fortnight, so they must prepare to attend. They discuss what goods they might bring to trade there, perhaps some of their surplus wool or a fine linen cloth they finished weaving. Even these everyday conversations carry the threads of community and planning for the future. When the sun stands overhead, the farmer returns from the fields, wiping sweat from his brow. The ploughing went well. He pats the oxen fondly before releasing them to rest and graze. The family gathers for the midday meal. They sit on benches around a low wooden table. Bowls of stew and bread are shared. There is no formal prayer as one would hear in later Christian times, but they might raise a horn of ale in a brief toast. Skål, thanking the gods and the land for the food. They eat heartily, tearing bread, sipping stew, smiling at one another. The thralls sit a little apart, but are given their portion too, once the masters have taken theirs. On a day like today, conversation is light. The farmer mentions that one of the sheep is due to lamb soon. The wife suggests they set up a warm stall for it tonight. The son excitedly talks about how strong the plough oxen were. The grandmother reminds everyone that the last frost might not have passed, so they should be careful about planting too early. These are humble, normal exchanges, nothing dramatic, but in their own way, comforting and grounding. After the meal, each returns to work. The farmer goes to repair a section of wattle fence that keeps the chickens out of the vegetable patch. The son takes the younger children to gather firewood from the edge of the forest, a chore that quickly turns into a little adventure as they pretend to be exploring new lands while picking up sticks. The wife and daughter carry the washing down to the stream. Some woolen tunics and linen undergarments need rinsing. They kneel by the clear water and scrub the clothes with homemade soap made from ashlie and animal fat. The cold water makes their hands pink, but the day is mild, and soon the garments are hung on a line or laid on sun-warmed rocks to dry. Vikings valued cleanliness more than the stereotypes suggest. Weekly baths were not uncommon, often on Saturdays, the bathing day, and grooming was important. Combs, tweezers, and ear spoons have been found in many excavation sites, showing that personal hygiene was part of daily life. In our village, you might see the farmer, once his tasks are done, stripping to the waist at the stream to wash sweat off, or maybe everyone taking turns using the wooden tub for a quick bath in the evening. In the late afternoon, when work winds down, there may be a brief respite. The grandmother sits in the doorway, sun on her face, and teaches the little ones a few simple verses, perhaps a riddle or a bit of wisdom poetry from the Havamal, words of the High One. She recites in a sing-song voice, and the children repeat, a lesson about how a guest should be treated with warmth and how one should not be boastful, but humble and wise. Such moral lessons are naturally woven into everyday teaching. Viking children learn by watching and doing. By age 7 or 8, they already help with baby animals, kitchen work, and small crafts. By their early teens, boys are learning to handle a fishing boat or swing a scythe, and girls can spin, weave, cook, and keep a household ledger in their head. Formal schooling doesn't exist, but knowledge is passed down through hands-on practice and storytelling. As evening approaches, the orange glow of sunset settles over the village. Sheep and cows are herded back into their pens, chickens into their roost. The farmer's family reconvenes inside the longhouse for the night. A warm stew of beans and dried fish has been prepared for supper, flavored with salt and dill. The family and their thralls sit together to eat by lamplight. An oil lamp carved from soapstone casts a steady yellow flame, and the hearth is stoked again to chase away the evening chill. There is a sense of fulfillment. Another day's essential work is done, and everyone is safe and fed. Outside, you can hear the distant howl of a wolf from the deep woods, but the livestock are secured, and the dogs lying by the door lift their heads only briefly before settling back down. After supper, the mood is genial and relaxed. The farmer perhaps takes out a set of game pieces, little carved bones, and a marked wooden board, to play Hnefatafl, a strategy board game, with his son by the fire. The tapping of the pieces and their occasional chuckles are the only sounds for a while, as others quietly busy themselves. The mother has brought out a basket of broken pottery shards and is fitting them together, hoping to repair a cracked clay jug with some heated pine pitch. The daughter is braiding her younger brother's hair, and the grandmother hums an old lullaby to the fair baby who is already dozing in her lap. The atmosphere is one of peace and togetherness, the kind that settles after a productive day. Before sleep, they take a moment for storytelling, a favorite time of day for many Norse families. Tonight, the grandmother decides to tell a familiar tale, the legend of how Thor, the thunder god, went on a fishing trip to catch the great serpent of the sea. The children's eyes grow wide as she describes Thor rowing far out into a dark ocean and pulling up the giant serpent Jörmungandr on his line, the boat almost capsizing as thunder rolled. She makes the motions with her hands, and even the adults grin, having heard this tale many times, but still loving its drama. Of course, she ends it on a gentle note, with Thor letting the serpent go, in this version, to keep the peace of the sea. The little ones are satisfied and sleepy. One by one, they curl up on the raised wooden platforms along the walls that serve as beds, each with a stuffed straw, mattress, and covered in thick wool blankets and furs to stay warm. The thralls retire to their small nook near the barn or kitchen area after finishing cleaning the bowls. Finally, oil lamps are blown out, leaving only the dim glow of embers. In the darkness, the longhouse is quiet. Perhaps through the small smoke hole, a star's light peeps in, or in summer, a faint twilight persists outside. The family sleeps close to one another, with even the dogs finding a spot at their feet. The scents of the day, wood, stew, wool, and smoke, linger like a comforting perfume. This is home, snug, secure, full of the soft sounds of loved ones breathing and shifting occasionally in their sleep. In such a life, there is a profound sense of contentment in simple things. Each day holds hard work, yes, but also moments of laughter, creativity, and connection. The Vikings were renowned as fierce warriors abroad, but here in their villages, they were tender parents, diligent farmers, and clever artisans. They cherished their families and took pride in their daily labors. If you listen closely in this longhouse at night, you might even hear the farmer murmur a quiet thanks to the gods for the day's good fortune. A healthy calf born, a field ploughed, a meal enjoyed. His wife might whisper a hope that tomorrow is as blessed as today. These humble prayers are more felt than spoken, a gentle faith that life will continue kindly. As we leave the quiet household, we carry with us the image of that glowing hearth and the gentle routines of the village. The Norse daily life, though filled with chores and practical concerns, had its own grace and beauty. It was the foundation upon which all the grander adventures were built. Without the farmers, weavers, cooks, and smiths keeping the home fires burning, there would be no brave voyages or epic sagas. Knowing this side of the Vikings, the home and hearth side paints a fuller, softer picture of these people as human beings, much like us, who found joy in family, pride in a well-made loaf of bread or a finely crafted tool, and comfort in a warm home on a cool evening. Our journey will now turn from the earthly and everyday to the realm of the imagination and spirit. Having warmed ourselves at the Viking hearth, we will venture into their stories and beliefs. In the next chapter, we'll dim the lights and listen to the whispered myths of the Norse, the tales of Odin the wise wanderer, thunderous Thor, gentle Freya, and the great world tree that holds the 9 realms. We'll explore how mythology and belief infused every aspect of Viking life with meaning and wonder, giving them guidance and hope through both good times and bad. For now, take one last look at the peaceful village under the evening sky, and let its quiet optimism settle in your mind as we prepare to dream of gods and legends. Myths under the midnight sky. As dusk settles over our imagined Viking village, the flicker of the hearth casts long shadows, and minds wander to the realm of story and spirit. The Norse world was alive not only with the sights and sounds of nature, but with a rich tapestry of myths and unseen forces. For the Vikings, the night sky wasn't just a scattering of stars, it was a window into the cosmos of their beliefs. Up there, somewhere beyond the pole star, they imagined mighty Asgard, home of their gods, and stretching across the heavens, they envisioned the great ash tree, Yggdrasil, the world tree, its branches and roots binding together 9 worlds of existence. Picture that cosmic tree in your mind. Its crown soars into a bright realm of endless summer, where the gods dwell, while its roots twist down into darker, misty domains of giants and the spirits of the dead. In between, on one sturdy branch, lies Midgard, the world of humans, our world, encircled by a vast ocean and protected by the gods. The Vikings believed Midgard was connected to Asgard by a rainbow bridge called Bifrost, which shimmered with hues of red, blue, and green whenever the gods traveled its span. When we see a rainbow arcing after a storm, perhaps we too can imagine that bridge glowing in the sky, linking Earth to something divine. Let's travel with our ears now, listening to a mother in a longhouse telling her children about the worlds held in Yggdrasil's embrace. Her voice is low and soothing as she describes them. There is Asgard, realm of the great Aesir gods like wise Odin and thunderous Thor, and Vanaheim, home of the gentle Vanir gods of fertility and prosperity. There is Alfheim, where the light elves dance in sunlit groves, and deep beneath the mountains lies Svartalfheim, or Nidavellir, where clever dwarves hammer out wondrous treasures in their forges. In the center of it all is Midgard, the green world of humans, encircled by a mighty sea that a great serpent calls home. Further out, and far colder, is Jotunheim, the craggy land of giants, where cliffs and frosts stretch under an overcast sky. And beyond even that, at the uttermost extremes, exist primordial realms. Muspelheim, a land of swirling fire, and Niflheim, a place of icy mists. In the dim underworld below lies Hell, sometimes considered part of Niflheim, a quiet, shadowy hall where those who died of sickness or old age find rest. As the mother speaks, the children's eyes grow heavy, but their dreams will be populated with these vivid places, sparkling elf courts, giants' castles of ice, fields of glory where heroes feast. To the Norse, these weren't just fairy tales. They were part of the spiritual geography of the universe, ever present, just beyond the veil of the visible. Central to all their myths is Yggdrasil itself. The mother might describe it so vividly that one can almost feel the rough bark of the world tree and smell its sap. She tells of its 3 great roots that reach into Asgard, Jotunheim and Niflheim, drawing water from sacred wells. At one root is the Spring of Fate, Urd's Well, where 3 wise maidens, the Norns, sit weaving the destiny of gods and men. She explains that these Norns spin threads for each life, one for what has been, one for what is, and one for what is to come. Every birth in Midgard, including each of us listening now, sets a new thread on their loom. By a candle's glow, the children's mother once heard the same saga from her own grandfather, and now hearing it again through the skald's art brings tears to her eyes. When she continues, she describes how other gods tend Yggdrasil, how Odin hung himself upon its branches to gain wisdom, how the squirrel Ratatosk carries messages up and down its trunk. The children imagine the cosmic tree alive with creatures, a great eagle perched in its high limbs, a fearsome dragon gnawing at its deepest root. Yet Yggdrasil endures, green leaves fed by the waters of life. In this way, she conveys to them a sense of the Norse cosmos, a living structure where everything is connected, from the halls of the gods to the world of men to the dark realms below. Now the mother turns to the tales of the gods themselves. She tells of Odin, the All-Father, the one-eyed wanderer who gave an eye for wisdom at Mimir's well and hung 9 nights on the world tree to gain the secret of runes. She recounts how Odin often walks Midgard, disguised as an old man in a broad hat and cloak, testing people's hospitality and dispensing insight. Around the hearth, an older listener softly adds, "So always be kind to strangers," and the children nod solemnly, eyes wide, for who knows if a grey beggar at the door is Odin in disguise. Next, she tells of Thor, the Thunderer, protector of mankind. There are chuckles as she describes Thor's appetite, so great he once drank an ocean, nearly dry in a giant's hall, not realizing it, and cheers when she mimics Thor throwing his hammer. Mjolnir at a towering giant, making the firelight jump as if struck by lightning. But she reassures them that Thor is a friend to good folk. He is the noise in the summer storm, yes, but also the bringer of the rains that water their barley. When thunder reverberates in the distance, one child whispers, "Thor is riding again," and no one feels afraid. The mother also speaks of Freya, the beautiful goddess of love and fate, whose tears turn to gold. Perhaps someone quietly fingers a little pendant of a hawk or a cat, symbols of Freya, in reverence. Another woman chimes in with a snippet of a song about Freya's necklace, breezing amen, how it shines like the northern lights. In a corner of the longhouse, the Scold, who earlier regaled the hall with saga, now listens, smiling at the mother's storytelling. He knows these old myths by heart, yet in her soft voice they gain a new warmth. This is how the faith and lore of the Norse pass from generation to generation, not by strict doctrines or scriptures, but by fireside tales told with love. The little ones slowly drift to sleep as the stories spin on. Perhaps they dream of Freya, Freya's brother, gently urging the crops to grow with his golden bristled boar by his side, or of Tyr, bravely placing his hand in the wolf Fenrir's mouth as a pledge, losing it when the wolf breaks its promise, a tale of courage and sacrifice they'll fully grasp when older. The mother ends the myth-telling on a comforting note. She describes Ragnarok, not in fearful terms, but as a distant event beyond anyone's lifetime, a time of great trial that even the gods must face. She assures them that after that darkness, a new world will emerge, fresh and green, and a new sun will rise. It's a promise of renewal. So even the gods have hope, she whispers, kissing each child's brow. The children sigh contentedly, snuggling under wool blankets as embers cast a soft glow. They feel safe knowing that the same eternal tree that holds all the worlds also shelters them, and that even if Odin and Thor one day meet their fates, life will go on, renewed and blessed. Belief for the Vikings was not confined to grand myths. It seeped into the fabric of everyday life. They felt the presence of spirits all around. The forest had its hidden folk, perhaps elves or landvatir, land spirits, that could bless or hinder a farm. The family might leave a small offering of bread or milk on a flat stone at the edge of their field at dusk, a polite gift for the land spirits to keep them content. Under the house, it was said, lived the Nissa, or household sprites, sometimes called house elves, who would help with chores unseen if treated kindly, but might play tricks if neglected. Thus, once a week, the farmer's wife sets out a wooden bowl of porridge with a pat of butter in the barn loft, whispering, "This is for you, old friend," in case a helpful spirit might be listening. Formal worship, when it happened, was a communal and earthy affair. There were no churches in the pagan Norse world like we think of them, but there were sacred spaces, groves of ancient oak trees, or hofs, temples, made of timber, where the community would gather for important rites called blots, sacrifices. Imagine a summer day, with the village gathered in a clearing of the woods. Sunlight filters green and golden through the leaves. At the center stands an altar stone. The local chieftain, or gothi, priest, leads the ceremony, raising a horn of ale toward the sky. They offer thanks to Thor for protecting the community, and to Freya and Freyja for the fertility of their fields and families. In earlier times, this ritual could involve sacrificing animals like a boar or goat. The lifeblood returned to the earth, and the meat later cooked and shared in a feast. But let us keep our scene gentle. Perhaps they sacrifice symbolic offerings instead. Baskets of the first grain, garlands of summer, flowers, carved wooden idols, laying them on the altar with reverence. The people join hands or lift their voices in an old hymn, a wordless melody that resonates with the rustling leaves. In that moment, they feel a profound connection with the unseen. There is a sense that the gods are very near, listening and smiling, and that the boundary between the human world and the divine is tissue thin under the midsummer sun. At other times, especially in troubled or uncertain days, the Vikings turned to prophets and prophetesses to glimpse what fate held. A vulva, a wandering seeress, clad in a dark blue cloak and bearing a staff of power, might be invited into a village to perform seether, a ritual of seeing and shaping fortune. Our village experiences this one autumn evening. The air is crisp, and the community gathers inside the longhouse by lamplight, an expectant hush falling over them. The vulva stands in the center, her eyes closed, slowly chanting an eerie, beautiful song that seems to vibrate in the very timbers of the hall. The women of the village sing softly with her, a supportive chorus weaving a web of sound. In the silence between verses, one can hear only the crackle of the fire. After a time, the vulva's chanting ceases, and she sways gently, as though in a trance. Then, in a voice not quite her own, she speaks of what she sees, perhaps warning of a coming storm that they must prepare for, or a good omen for next spring's planting, or a message from a departed ancestor, giving comfort to the living. The people listen with rapt attention. Some are wide-eyed, some bow their heads. When she finishes, she is given deep bows of respect and rich gifts, perhaps a precious brooch or a fur cloak. They know that not just anyone can walk the paths she walks between worlds. The sagas say such seeresses were highly revered, and indeed in our village they treat her almost like a visiting dignitary, offering the best seat and finest food. That night, many sleep easier, feeling guidance has been received from beyond. Throughout all these beliefs runs a golden thread of meaning. The Norse myths and rituals gave people a framework to understand life's wonders and hardships. When lightning struck a tree near the village, They did not merely see random destruction. They saw Thor's might, perhaps a sign or reminder of his presence. When a child recovered from a severe illness against all odds, it was not only good fortune, it might be that Ea, the healer goddess, or benevolent spirits, had lent their aid. This way of seeing the world imbued every aspect of life with a sense of connection to something larger and more magical. The very days of the week whispered of their gods, with Tyr's Day Tuesday, Odin's Day, Wednesday, Thor's Day, Thursday, and Freya's Day, Friday, each keeping the deities ever in mind as time went by. In their art and carvings, dragons and knotwork hinted at the intertwined nature of the mortal and divine. Even their language held echoes of the sacred. A simple oath like, "By Thor," uttered when someone was surprised, or carving runes on the prow of a new ship to invoke good fortune, were everyday acts that bridged their world with the gods. Now, as the hour grows late in our story's village, the voices around the hearth begin to fade one by one. One man adds a last log to the fire and murmurs a prayer to Odin to send good dreams. A mother tucks her child in a little tighter and quietly recites an old blessing. Sleep safe under the All-Father's eye. Sleep sweet under Freya's sky. The child smiles, already half in dream, perhaps envisioning playing in green Alfheim, or flying among the stars with the Valkyries. Outside, the silver crescent moon gleams over dark pine silhouettes. Maybe, just maybe, if we stepped outside now and looked up, we could see a faint streak across the night, a milky way of stars that the Norse fancied was the Bifrost, bridge aglow, or sparks from Thor's hammer as he fought trolls in the distance. The mythology of the Vikings was not merely entertainment, it was a comfort and a compass. It told them that they were part of a grand cycle, born of the earth and the gods' breath, living under the tree of time, destined ultimately to dine with ancestors in the halls of the afterlife. These beliefs gave them courage in battle, humility in success, and solace in sorrow. And importantly, their myths often taught ethical lessons. Be brave like Thor, wise but humble like Odin, loving like Freya, and hospitable to guests and strangers, for one never knew if Odin himself might be in disguise. Listening to these ancient stories under the midnight sky, one can feel a gentle power in them, as if the very universe is singing a lullaby of its own history. With hearts and imaginations nourished by such tales, the people of our Viking village finally drift into sleep. The fire dies down to soft amber coals. Outside, a night breeze rustles through the barley fields, perhaps carrying with it the last notes of the Volva's chant or the distant gallop of Odin's horse among the clouds. In this peaceful darkness, the Norse understanding of the world, rich with gods and spirits, wraps around them like a warm blanket. We have glimpsed their heavens and their hearts. Next, we will return to earth and sea, to the remarkable vessels that carried the Norse across the waves, and the knowledge that guided them to far-off shores. But for now, take a last calm breath of the night, air scented with wood smoke, and imagine the great tree Yggdrasil spreading its branches above, protecting all the 9 worlds, including our own, under its enduring, starlit canopy. The Longship and the open sea. By the rocky shore of a fjord, as spring sunlight glitters on the gentle waves, a group of Norse craftsmen and farmers gather around the frame of a ship under construction. The air is filled with the clean, resinous scent of fresh-cut wood. A master shipwright, sleeves rolled up, runs his hand along a long oak plank, feeling its curve. With a satisfied nod, he motions to his apprentices. They lift the plank and fit it onto the growing hull, overlapping it carefully above the plank below. Another worker heats an iron rivet in a small brazier until it's red hot. Then two men on either side of the plank hammer it through pre-drilled holes, fastening the wood securely. A rhythmic tock, tock, tock echoes across the water as iron meets iron and wood. Piece by piece, the skeleton of the vessel transforms into the sleek form of a Viking longship. Viking ships were masterpieces of both art and engineering, yet they were built using simple hand tools and keen ingenuity. The keel, a long, stout, oak beam running along the bottom center, was laid first to give the ship its spine. From there, the shipwright raised a rib-like framework of curved timbers, then began attaching long planks for the hull. Using a broad axe rather than a saw, they split the oak logs into planks, following the grain so that each plank was strong and flexible. These planks were then shaved and shaped with draw knives to fit snugly against one another. Instead of placing planks edge to edge, the Norse builders overlapped them like the scales of a fish, a technique called clinker or lapstrake construction. As we watch, we see how each new plank sits slightly above the one below, the join sealed with tarred wool or moss to make it watertight. This gives the hull a distinctive ripple texture and also a marvelous flexibility. When at sea, the ship's wooden skin can flex and bend slightly with the waves, rather than resisting them stiffly, making the longship astonishingly resilient in rough water. Nearby, the village blacksmith toils at his forge to make the hundreds of iron rivets needed. We see him heat a small rod of iron until it glows orange. Then two assistants carry it swiftly to the hull, where one holds a heavy iron dolly against the rivet's head outside the hull, while another peens over the inside end with a hammer, clenching the plank firmly to its neighbor. As each rivet cools, it contracts, pulling the planks even tighter together. The shipwright smiles quietly. He knows that these iron bonds, spaced every few inches along each overlap, give the ship great strength without heavy bulk. As the hull takes shape, one can admire its elegant lines. The longship is symmetrical, with a graceful, upturned prow and stern, so it can sail either direction as needed. At the bow, an intricate carving begins to emerge under the hands of a woodcarver. Today, he is chiseling the likeness of a dragon's head, its serpentine neck arcing proudly, meant to strike awe and perhaps bitter fear in those who see it from afar. But right now, with chips of wood falling at his feet and birds singing in the birch trees behind him, it seems more gentle art than menace. The interior framework is added next. Slender crossbeams and floor timbers that brace the hull but also serve as rowing benches. We peek inside the nearly finished ship to see the layout. Along each side, evenly spaced, are oval openings just below the gunwale, the oar ports through which the crew will row. The builder demonstrates a clever feature. Each oar hole has a wooden plug or shutter that can close it when oars aren't in use, keeping waves from splashing in. Amidships, a stout wooden mast is being fitted. It rests in a strong wooden block called a keelson, right above the keel, and is further supported by stays, ropes, that will later be attached to the sides of the ship. At the foot of the mast, they will eventually place a large rectangular sail, folded away for now. The sail is not ready yet. Back in the longhouse, several women are hard at work weaving strips of woolen fabric that will later be sewn edge to edge to form the sail. It will be a splendid sight, perhaps dyed a rusty red, or adorned with bold stripes of natural white and blue. To strengthen it against the wind and weather, they will rub it with animal fats or wax, a trick known to make the wool both sturdier and more water-resistant. A crucial piece is added to the right-hand side of the ship's stern, the steering oar, a long paddle-like rudder that will serve as the ship's wheel. The Norse attach it with a loop of cord through a hole in the hull and a sturdy wooden pin, so it can pivot freely. It's always on the right side, the steerboard side. And indeed, our very word starboard comes from this Old Norse practice. The steering oar is large and leaf-shaped, and the shipwright gives it a fond pat. Without it, no matter how fine the hull or sail, the ship could not be easily guided. Finally, the day comes when the Longship is ready to meet its element. The villagers gather for the launching with excitement. The hull, now fully assembled and tarred to a rich black-brown sheen, has been decorated with a few touches. That dragon prow glints with patterns of painted knotwork in red and white, and along the rail, round wooden shields have been hung edge to edge, each painted boldly in colours of the families who contributed warriors or crew to this vessel. The ship is perched on rollers of birch logs, leading down to the water's edge. It rests surprisingly light on the shore, having no heavy keel or ballast yet. A dozen strong people can push it. Indeed, the secret of the Viking longship is its lightness and shallow draft. It can skim through waters only a metre or so deep, and can even be carried over land by its crew when necessary. At the shipbuilder's signal, the group begins to chant a slow, powerful song and push in unison. The longship slides forward on its log rollers towards the shining fjord. With a few more heaves, suddenly, gravity takes over. The prow kisses the water with a soft splash, and then, amid cheers and laughter, the entire vessel slips gracefully into the sea. It floats high and level, rocking gently in the small waves. For a moment, all admire how natural it looks on water, as if some great seabird has just alighted on a lake. They christen the ship with a name, perhaps Foam Dancer, or Odin's Swan, names often poetic and tied to the sea. A bowl of ale is poured over the dragon prow as a blessing, and the oldest man present murmurs a prayer to Njord, the god of the sea, that this ship may sail far and home again safely. In that act, he's continuing a tradition older than anyone can remember, giving a sacrifice of ale, a cherished drink, to Njord and Aegir, the divine masters of sea and wind, to earn their favour for the voyages to come. As the afternoon sun turns the fjord golden, the crew, many of them, the very same craftsmen who built the ship, clamber aboard for the maiden voyage. There's laughter as they find their rowing benches and unship the long oars from the racks. Each oar is a lengthy pole of spruce, smooth and flexible, with a flat blade at the end, carved and sanded carefully so as not to warp in water. With a confident call, the newly appointed skipper, perhaps the shipwright himself, today gives the order to row. The oars dip and pull in practiced harmony. Most of these men have rowed since their youth in smaller fishing boats. The longship glides forward, out into the fjord's deeper water. The sensation is exhilarating yet gentle. The vessel responds eagerly to each stroke, moving faster than one might expect from human muscle alone. This is because it is so marvelously slim and streamlined, slicing the water with its sharp bow and barely disturbing the surface. After a short while, once they've cleared the lee of the land, the skipper decides to test the sail. The mast had been stepped upright after launch, and now a couple of men haul on ropes to raise the heavy woolen sail that had been lying folded. It unfurls with a whomp as a light breeze catches it. Immediately, the ship surges and the men cheer. They ship their oars, laying them inside the boat, and let the wind take over. The Longship's single square sail billows out, reddish-brown against the blue sky. A crewman adjusts a rope on the side to trim the sail's angle just right to the breeze. Now we witness the magic of Norse seamanship. The helmsman, at the stern, gently moves the steering oar, feeling the pull of the water. The ship turns smoothly, aiming towards the mouth of the fjord. The breeze is steady and coming from aft of the beam. A good wind. The Longship picks up speed, skimming over the fjord like a swan. Those on shore clap and whoop, tiny figures now receding. On deck, the crew grin at each other. Some stretch out their arms as if to embrace the wind, and others whoop back to the shore, full of joy. The skipper stands near the mast, one hand on a taut stay rope, and closes his eyes for a moment, feeling how the ship moves. He can sense she is balanced, true, and eager. Perhaps he whispers a thanks to Thor or to Aegir, the spirit of the sea, for such a fine day to sail. We sail with them in our imagination, out of the calm bay and into the open sea channel. The water changes hue to a darker blue-green, and gentle swells begin to make the Longship rise and fall in a slow rhythm. The vessel handles it beautifully. The flexible hull flexes softly with each wave, and the prow parts the sea with hardly a splash. The high bow tossing off the wave crests that curl along the sides. A few of the younger crew dangle their hands overboard, letting the cool spray hit their fingers and laughing. Gulls cry overhead, gliding in the updrafts from the sail. Now, the crew begins to settle into the quiet routine of sailing. 2. Men take positions on either side of the hull to hold the sail's lines. Sheets, adjusting tension as the wind shifts subtly. The helmsman squints at the far horizon and keeps the steering oar steady, his bare arm flexing against the pressure of water as he holds course. In these peaceful moments, the Norse sailors rely on their deep knowledge of sea and sky to guide them. For now, within sight of land, it's straightforward. Steer along the coastline, keeping the familiar mountain peaks to port. But soon, they will go further, perhaps on a journey across open ocean to another land. How will they find their way with no modern instruments? A grey-bearded sailor, serving as the navigator, looks upward. The sun is still a few hours from setting, and in these northern latitudes, it will linger long. He notes its position relative to the ship's mast and shadows on deck. In the evening, he'll watch the pattern of stars. The North Star, which they call the guiding star, always hangs in the same spot in the sky, and by its height above the horizon, he can judge latitude. The Vikings are keen observers of nature's subtle cues. They know the prevailing winds at different times of year, and how certain cloud patterns can hint at land beyond the horizon. For example, low streaks of cloud often form over ice or coasts. On board this ship, they have a few aids beyond the stars and sun. One young man pulls out a curious disc of wood with carved markings. It's a kind of sun compass. He sets it on a flat surface and uses a small gnomon, a stick, to cast a shadow. Earlier that day, before they set out, he marked where the tip of the shadow fell at local noon, carving a curve on the disc. Now, by aligning the shadow to that curve, he can approximate the cardinal directions. This simple tool, based on the movement of the sun, helps them maintain a straight course, even if the coastline disappears from view. There are rumors, too, of a sunstone, a special crystal some navigators carry that can reveal the sun's position, even behind clouds, by polarizing the light. But whether our crew has such a stone, or whether it's more legend than reality, is uncertain. What they definitely have are their senses and collective experience. The navigator might release a carved chip of wood into the water and watch how it drifts relative to the hull, gauging speed by how fast it falls behind. To check depth as they near an unknown shore, they use a lead weight tied to a line, casting it ahead and feeling when it hits bottom, a method so simple yet effective that mariners still used it for centuries after. And then there are the birds. Sailors watch for the presence of certain birds that always stay near land, or the direction that flocks fly at sunset, knowing that certain birds, like herring gulls or puffins, rarely venture too far from shore. If they see one heading purposefully with a beak full of fish in late afternoon, likely it's flying back to its coastal nest. Thus, follow that bearing to find land. On foggy mornings, they might even release ravens and observe their path. A raven that doesn't return is probably heading towards the nearest coast, an old trick said to be used by the legendary voyager Floki. As the Longship sails on, we notice more about its design that marries function and beauty. The deck is mostly open, aside from the central mast and a few sea chests that double as benches and storage for the crew's belongings. There is no cabin on a warship like this. The men will sleep under the stars or under a tent rigged over the ship when it's moored. Amidships, lashed down, are barrels of fresh water and ale, and sacks of dried fish and bread for provisions. The ship is not large, perhaps 20 meters, 70 feet long, and 5 meters wide at its broadest, but it is enough to carry 30 or so men on great voyages. If this were a broader trading ship, it would have fewer oars and a deeper hull for cargo, capable of carrying livestock or heavy goods across the sea. But our vessel is a versatile longship, lean and swift. The men have even brought their shields and weapons on this trial run, partly out of pride and partly out of habit, for one never sails entirely unarmed in these times. The hours of the afternoon pass softly. The wind remains gentle and steady. Out here, in open water, one can truly appreciate the Norse sailors' harmony with the sea. They speak little. A few are softly singing a sailing song, not a shanty of hard labor, but a lilting tune, maybe a hymn to Njord or Aegir. The helmsman hums along. He feels a slight change in the tiller's resistance. The wind is shifting. The navigator notices the sail's edge flutter slightly and calls out, "Trim the sail." 2 crewmen adjust the sheets, and the sail fills properly again. The longship hardly lost speed during this small maneuver. She responds as if alive to the crew's intentions. Eventually, as the sun dips lower and paints the western sky in hues of orange and pink, the skipper decides they must turn back toward home. They have proven the ship in fair conditions. Another day, they will test her in stronger winds, but no need to press fortune on this maiden voyage. He gives the order, and the crew moves gracefully into action. This time, to turn around, they demonstrate an impressive trick. They'll perform a tack, a kind of zigzag turn into the wind. Many contemporary ships with fixed rudders and heavy hulls cannot easily tack, but the Viking ship, with its clever sail and steering oar, can do so with skill. The helmsman gently pushes the steering oar, the sheet handlers adjust, and the sail is loosed and caught on the opposite side. The longship turns in a wide arc until the wind comes from the other side. In a few moments, they are now on the opposite tack, heading back into the fjord. The operation was quiet and smooth, the only sounds being the creak of ropes and the flutter of the sail's canvas. Even those of us watching from afar would scarcely believe such a maneuver possible if we hadn't seen it. But it is exactly this agility that made Viking ships the dread and envy of other seafarers of their age. Where bulkier ships had to anchor and wait for favorable winds, the longship could dance with the breeze and proceed almost regardless of wind direction. As twilight gathers, the longship slips back into the familiar waters of the home bay. The villagers on shore, who had spent the day fishing or tending chores, but always with one eye on the horizon, come out to greet the returning vessel. Torches are lit, their flames twinkling in the gentle dusk. The sail is taken in and furled. The crew return to the oars for the final approach. The water is glassy and reflects the purple of the emerging night sky. One can hear the oars dipping in unison, plish, 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 and the quiet rumble of the hull as it glides up to the landing. The men hop out into the shallow water and push the ship up onto the pebbled beach. Their families gather around, embracing them and quickly peppering them with questions. How does she handle? Is she fast? Did you see any whales? The shipwright raises his hands and speaks softly. She is as fine a ship as I have ever sailed. She will carry us far and home again. That simple endorsement brings proud smiles all around. Tonight, they will haul the ship a little higher on shore and secure her. Some might even sleep aboard or nearby, unwilling to leave their beautiful creation alone on her first night. A small feast is held by the fires near the beach. Roasted fish, bread and butter, plenty of ale, as they celebrate the birth of a new ship into their community. By the firelight, a traveller from another village, who joined to witness the launch, shares a tale of his own. He describes a journey he took on a similar longship across the open ocean to a far-off land of rolling green hills. Perhaps he speaks of England or Ireland. He recalls how their ship navigated by the stars and how they sighted dolphins dancing at the prow for days on end. His voice is low and calming, and everyone listens in rapt, sleepy attention as he recounts how, when fog enveloped them, the navigator used his sunstone to locate the hidden sun and set them back on course. How seabirds led them to safety, and how, after weeks at sea, their trusty longship brought them to harbour none the worse for wear. As he speaks, the young children yawn and lean against their mothers, dreaming of gentle waves and fearless voyages. The older folk nod, knowing that with this new ship, their village too will send out explorers, traders, perhaps even proud raiders, but all that will be as fate decides. For now, they are simply grateful for the gift of a vessel that can carry them over the vast and mysterious sea. In the dying light, we take one last look at the longship pulled onto the Yate, Pebbles, its dragon-head prow, silhouetted against the twilight sky. It seems almost alive in the flicker of the bonfire, as if eager for the next adventure. These ships were the wings of the Vikings, enabling them to travel farther than almost any people of their time, from the far eastern rivers of Russia to the stormy North Atlantic, to lands as distant as Iceland, Greenland, even North America. But within the scope of our gentle journey tonight, we focus not on war or conquest, but on the harmonious relationship between these seafarers and their craft. How lovingly they shaped wood and iron into something that marries strength and flexibility. How calmly they read sun and star to find their way. How bravely, yet humbly, they ventured into the unknown, with trust in their skills and their ship. As the fires burn low and the crew's celebration quiets into soft singing of an old sea ballad, we step away from the shore. We carry with us the serene image of a Viking longship gliding across calm waters under a clear sky, the flap of its sail, the steady pull of oars, the guidance of sun and stars leading it onward. In our next chapter, we will follow where these ships led, to the bustling markets and far-flung shores, where Norse traders met the wider world. But for now, let the gentle rocking of the phantom waves lull our minds, as if we ourselves were curled up on deck under a wool cloak, listening to the creak of timbers and the hush of water against the hull, a Viking lullaby on the open sea. Markets and meeting of worlds. It is early morning in the Viking trading town of Hedeby. A light mist hangs over the harbour, where longships and nars, stout cargo vessels, are moored side by side. As the sun gently rises, the town stirs to life. We walk along a broad dirt street, lined with wooden stalls and thatched workshops. The air is crisp and filled with an intoxicating mix of smells: wood smoke from breakfast fires, the brine of the nearby sea, and enticing hints of spices and pitch. Merchants from many lands have gathered here, and their quiet conversations overlap in a musical babble of different tongues. A Norse farmer in a wool tunic greets a Saxon trader with a nod. Not far off, a Slavic woman from the east arranges her wares next to a Frisian fisherman unloading barrels of salted herring. Hedeby is alive with commerce, protected by its stout earthen ramparts and the goodwill of the Danish king, who values the wealth it brings. Strolling through the market, we encounter a dazzling array of goods laid out on blankets and wooden tables. Here is a pile of soft, thick furs, fox, marten, ermine, brought by a Swedish trapper from the dense northern forests. Next to them, spread on a colourful woven cloth, are chunks of translucent amber glowing golden in the morning light, harvested from the shores of the Baltic Sea. A few stalls down, our nose catches the sharp, exotic aroma of black pepper and cinnamon. A dark-haired man in a long robe, perhaps a trader from the distant caliphate, or an intermediary from Spain, is carefully measuring out these precious spices on a small bronze scale for a well-dressed Norwegian chieftain. In exchange, the chieftain's servant opens a carved wooden chest to reveal glittering pieces of amber and a roll of finely woven wool cloth. They barter with polite smiles, pepper for amber, spice for textile, each pleased to obtain something rare from far away. Under a striped awning, two old friends meet with hearty hugs. One is a Norse hunter named Odulfa, the other a fellow named Erika, who travelled south last summer. They sit on a bench, and Odulfa unwraps a beautiful otterskin pelt he has preserved. Its fur is sleek and glossy. Erika's eyes widen. Such a fine pelt is hard to come by. He reaches behind him and unsheathes a short sword from his gear. The sword's hilt glints with copper inlay, and its blade is of Frankish steel, known to be exceptionally strong and sharp. With few words, they agree to trade. Odulfa drapes the otter pelt over his friend's shoulder, and in return, belts on the sword at his own waist, both grinning broadly at the fairness of the exchange. This simple barter, recorded later as a runic inscription, is a perfect example of Viking commerce. One quality good, swapped for another, no coin changing hands, each man trusting the other's word and reputation. Hedeby's lanes grow busier as the sun climbs. A group of monks from the Frankish lands, identifiable by their robes, walk cautiously through the crowd, eyeing the more pagan elements with curiosity. They have brought religious trinkets, wine, and perhaps some glass beads to trade. A Norse housewife eagerly examines a string of green glass beads, such a vibrant color. She imagines how they will catch the light when sewn to her ceremonial apron. She offers in return a basket of fine wool yarn dyed blue with woad from her village. The monk's eyes light up at the yarn's quality, and they exchange with mutual satisfaction. Nearby, a small boy munches on a sweet treat, dried apples dipped in honey, while his father negotiates for a new iron plowshare. The blacksmith, who has a stall full of tools and weapons he forged over the winter, agrees to the deal for 3 silver coins and a hefty side of smoked pork. Coinage is not yet the main means of trade, but it's becoming more common. The smith tests each silver coin on his scale to ensure their weight, then nods, all fair. By the end of the Viking Age, weighed silver, whether coins, ingots, or chopped bits of jewelry, will be a primary medium of exchange, and merchants carry small sets of scales and weights to measure it out precisely. But here in Hedeby's earthy market, barter is still king, and trust oils the wheels of commerce. Let us wander towards the wharf, where larger transactions take place straight off the boats. A Nar from Gotland has just arrived, its hull low in the water under a cargo of iron and furs. The crew is unloading heavy sacks of iron ore and ingots, valuable for making tools and weapons, which will be sold to a Danish trader who's ready with a pile of goods in return. He's offering several barrels of salt, precious for preserving food, fine pottery from the Rhineland, and a bundle of silk cloth that came all the way from Constantinople. The Swede's eyes widen at the silk's quality and the pottery's craftsmanship. A deal is struck. Iron that will supply a smithy in Jutland is traded for those delicate southern luxuries. Through ports like Hedeby and Birka, such northern iron and furs made their way to the far south, while Arabic silver and Byzantine silks flowed into Nordic lands. Overseeing all this bustle is the watchful eye of Hedeby's guardian, the local jarl, noble, or perhaps even the king's appointed steward. High on the rampart, a few armed housecarls, guards, stand by, making sure peace is kept and that trade taxes are duly paid. Hedeby is fortified with ditches and earth walls, not to keep traders in, but to keep raiders out. The Danish king has invested in this town's security. King Harald Bluetooth even built a great timber palisade around it and stationed his warriors here. Under this protection, merchants feel safe bringing their wealth. Of course, in return, the king collects his dues, a portion of certain goods or a toll on ships that pass the Dannevirke, the Great Wall near Hedeby. But for the traders, it's worth it. They know a safe and orderly market allows them to prosper. In fact, not long ago, the elders say, back in 808 AD, the Danish king Godfred famously attacked a competing Slav trading town called Rerick and relocated all its merchants to Hedeby, strengthening this port's position. The message was clear. The king would go to great lengths to centralize commerce here, under his protection and taxation. As noon approaches, the market reaches its lively peak. We hear snatches of many languages. Old Norse, of course, predominates, but one can catch fragments of Old Saxon, the sing-song of Slavic dialects from traders who sailed from Palabian lands, and even occasional Arabic or Greek phrases as cosmopolitan travelers pass through. Over by the quayside, a small knot of people has gathered around a foreign visitor, an Andalusian Jew from Cordoba, known by the Norse simply as Altar Tushi. He's been visiting Hedeby out of scholarly curiosity. With an expressive face, he describes to an incredulous audience his home city in the far south, where libraries hold thousands of books and the streets are lit at night with oil lamps. The locals shake their heads in wonder. One asks, "What do you think of our Hedeby then?" Al-Tartushi pauses thoughtfully. In truth, he found Hedeby strange. He once wrote that he was surprised such an important port was still so modest, with wooden houses, no grand buildings, and people who sang loudly and to his ears, unpleasantly, during their feasts. But he is polite and merely says, "It is a busy and hardy place. Your lives may be simpler, but there is wealth here in the goods and the courage of your people." He tactfully omits his remarks about the thunderous singing and instead compliments a piece of amber he bought. The Norse merchants chuckle. They know well that Southerners have different tastes, but they take pride in their thriving town nonetheless. As the trading day winds down and the sun starts to dip westward, deals are concluded with handshakes and sometimes with the sharing of a horn of ale between bargaining partners. Many of these traders will pack up and depart on the next tide, some sailing back east to the Baltic, some venturing west to the Frankish Empire, and others preparing for longer journeys south. Let us follow one of these voyages now, transitioning from the close quarters chatter of Hedeby to the open waters and long rivers that link the Viking world to distant civilizations. We board a sturdy nar, laden with goods from today's market. Let's say bales of high-quality fox furs, a chest of Baltic amber, some carved walrus ivory figurines, and a few thralls, enslaved persons, acquired as part of a trade, destined sadly for sale in foreign lands. The captain of this ship is a seasoned merchant from Sweden named Rurik. As dusk falls, he and his mixed crew of Norse and Slavic oarsmen set sail eastward out of Hedeby's Bay. Our ship navigates through the Danish archipelagos into the Baltic Sea, a journey of several days before reaching the mouth of the Daugava River in modern Latvia. The night before entering the river, Rurik stands on deck under a sky thick with stars, softly humming an old tune. He has made this trip many times. With the northern star to guide, they find the river's outlet and begin rowing upstream, with the morning mist clinging to the water's surface. Now, the journey becomes a quiet river odyssey. Tall pine and birch forests line the banks. Birds call from the trees, the cry of an eagle, the honk of migrating geese. The crew sometimes falls silent, awed by the deep green beauty around them. They know they tread ancient paths. These waterways have carried Norse traders for decades, maybe longer. Their destination lies far inland, the great market of Kiev, on the Dnieper, and perhaps beyond that, the fabled city of Miklagardha, Constantinople. The river current is gentle here, but as days pass and they traverse from one river system to another, dragging the boat overland at portage points, with much grunting effort and good-natured curses, they encounter rapids. At one such portage, local Slavic villagers appear, as if by arrangement, to help the travelers carry their cargo and ship across a narrow neck of land. Payment is made in the form of a few beads and an iron axe head, small prices for invaluable help. In time, they join the mighty Dnieper River and glide southward. On a foggy morning, as the sun struggles to break through, our merchant Rurik takes out a small round disc, a sun compass like we saw before, to confirm their direction. Though the river's course is well known, the men row steadily, and sometimes a light sail is raised when the wind favors them from astern, helping ease their labor. Along the banks, they occasionally see other groups, perhaps fellow Varangians, Norse traders, camped for the night. their low chatting in Norse carrying over water, or a cluster of curious, Slavic fishermen waving to them. It's a peaceful enterprise at this moment, not a raid, but a voyage of exchange. Eventually, the merchant fleet for others have joined them en route, forming a small convoy for safety. Nears Kiev, the bustling Slavic Varangian settlement that has grown rich as a trade nexus. The site is striking. Atop a hill, wooden palisades and longhouses cluster, smoke rising from many hearths. The riverbank is crowded with boats, dugout canoes of local Slavs, and larger Norse ships like theirs. Rurik's crew is met by contacts who speak both Norse and Slavic. After friendly embraces and a swig of kvass, fermented drink, the trading begins anew. Much of their Baltic cargo might be traded here for goods from the vast steppes, fine honey, wax candles, and grain from the fertile south, even Arabian silver coins that made their way north via middlemen. But Rurik has bigger ambitions. His ultimate goal is Constantinople, so he retains the best furs and amber, knowing they fetch an excellent price there. Traveling further down the Dnieper, they pass the infamous Dnieper Rapids. Here, every man is on edge. These rapids have capsized many a boat. Our crew wisely hires local guides, perhaps Turkic nomads, the Pechenegs, who know these waters, to help them navigate or portage around the worst spots. At each major rapid, they might unload and carefully lower the ship with ropes, or carry it piece by piece. The roar of water and crash of spray is intimidating, but at last they emerge below the rapids into calmer, broader waters. A collective sigh of relief is breathed. The hardest part is over. Now the river flows smoothly toward the sea. Finally, weeks after leaving Hedeby, Rurik's vessel and a handful of others reach the delta, where the Dnieper meets the Black Sea. They hug the coast westward until one morning, there it is on the horizon, Constantinople. Even from afar, the city astounds them. Its thick stone walls gleam in the sun, seemingly unending. Atop those walls are towers, and between them, the tops of marble palaces and churches with golden domes that catch the morning light like fire. The Norse call this city Miklagarða, the Great City, and now it's clear why. For a moment, our hardy traders are silent, humbled by the grandeur. Many of them have been here before, yet each time the sight fills them with reverence. Entering Constantinople's harbour, they sail beneath immense fortified harbours and past hundreds of ships from all over the known world. Greeks, Arabs, Italians, all trading here. The Norse ships are guided to a quay set aside for them. The Byzantines know the Varangians, Norse, well, both as traders and as the famed Varangian Guard, who serve the emperor as elite warriors. As our merchant crew tie off their ship, they are met by a bustle of officials and interpreters. Deals are made in a babble of Greek and Norse, with some hand gestures for good measure. The furs are examined by finely dressed Byzantine merchants with careful, practiced touches. The amber is held up to the sun and admired. In exchange, Rurik receives heavy purses of silver coins, stamped with the profile of the emperor, and bolts of luxurious silk cloth, the kind of which would fetch small fortunes back in Scandinavia. He also acquires wine, spices like cumin and cardamom, and perhaps a reliquary or two for Christian converts back home who desire holy objects. The trade is lucrative beyond imagination. A single fine pelt might trade for its weight in silver here, and our merchant has dozens. In Constantinople, some of the Norse choose to stay on. A few tall, battle-scarred Swedes present themselves at the emperor's palace gates, seeking employment in the Varangian Guard. Legend says the emperors prized Norse guards for their fierce loyalty. But Rurik and most of his crew will return north before winter, pockets heavy with exotic wealth. Their homeward journey will trace back, up the rivers, laden now with foreign treasure, to delight the folks of Birka and Hedeby. Our view shifts back north, to other points of Viking trade. While Rurik journeys on the Russian rivers, there are Norse traders active in the west as well. We picture the harbour of York, which the Vikings called Jorvik, in England, around the same era. Once a conquered city, Jorvik has become a vibrant Viking kingdom's capital and a centre of commerce. Its muddy streets host Angles, Norse, and Celts, trading side by side. The Vikings here have even minted coins with the names of their kings, silver pennies that circulate in local markets. Many of the goods are familiar: wool, grain, iron. But from overseas come new wares: wine from Francia and pottery from the Rhineland, traded for Northumbrian woolcloth and Baltic amber. In Dublin, a Viking long fort, fortified harbour in Ireland, Norse merchants and craftsmen have established a thriving town. The Dubliners export fine Irish hides, slaves from war raids, and import Spanish wine and silks, offloaded from Moorish ships that venture to Ireland's shores. It's a truly interconnected world. A Norse settler in Iceland might be drinking wine pressed from Frankish grapes, or wearing a silk ribbon woven in faraway Baghdad, thanks to this web of trade routes. Not all was always peaceful, of course. Viking commerce had a shadow side. The trade in slaves was brisk, and many unfortunate captives from Slavic lands or the British Isles found themselves sold in markets like Hedeby or sent to Islamic lands via these routes. Yet, within the context of our gentle exploration, we see the human side of these exchanges. The way merchants laughed together over shared meals, the way knowledge of far places spread with each voyage, the way formerly hostile cultures found points of connection in mutually beneficial trade. The Norse were pragmatic, a people of both sword and scale. One moment they could raid a coast, and the next settle down to bargain for goods. Over time, many Vikings transitioned from raiders to settlers and traders, especially as Christian Europe's defences strengthened. Commerce became in many ways a more reliable path to wealth than plunder. We recall that treaty in the year 873, recorded in the Frankish annals. The Danish king Sigfrid sent emissaries to King Louis, the German at Worms, to secure peace in the borderlands. Their goal was to ensure that merchants could travel and trade in peace and safety between their realms. Imagine that meeting. Sturdy Danes, clad in fur-trimmed cloaks, presenting fine gifts, perhaps amber or a sleek hunting falcon, to the Frankish king, and in return receiving bolts of embroidered cloth and promises of friendship. Such diplomacy was a far cry from the violence of earlier decades. It speaks to the Vikings' adaptability. They desired not only gold from raids, but stable networks of exchange. Through treaties like this, Viking rulers signaled that they, too, valued the prosperity that comes from peaceful trade. As the sun sets on a day of trading, whether in Hedeby or Constantinople or York, we see our Norse traders at rest. In Hedeby, the market stalls are packed up, and the town's tavernas fill with people swapping stories and samples of drink from each other's lands. A Danish merchant shares a mug of Frankish wine with a Saxon, while a Swedish trapper tries a puff on a fine Abbasid water pipe, shisha, offered by an adventurous visitor, coughing with wide eyes as the smoke surprises him, causing hearty laughter all around. On the docks, ships bob gently, heavy with new cargo to carry home. Men untie their long beards or scarves and let the cool evening breeze soothe them after the clamour of the day. There is camaraderie in these moments. Perhaps a travelling bard strikes up a tune on a lyre, singing a gentle song about the far wanderer, Odin in disguise, who travels through strange lands gathering wisdom and wealth. The chorus is soft and many join in, their voices mingling in multiple languages yet somehow finding harmony. In such scenes, we witness the Vikings not as marauders, but as voyagers and entrepreneurs who knit together distant corners of the world. The legacy of their trading is profound. Place names like Rus, the root of Russia, come from Swedish Vikings who settled and ruled in the east, and words like Norman, Northman, describe the Norse who made new homes in France. They left traces of themselves in the silver coins buried in Swedish soil, in the silk ribbons found in Greenland's frozen graves, and in the very genes and stories of the peoples they touched. The Viking Age was not only longships bearing warriors, but also longships bearing families and goods, forging a global network in an age that had never seen its like. Now, after a full day of envisioning far-flung trade, the twilight breeze on the wharves grows cool. Torches and lamps are lit one by one along Hedeby's streets, casting wavering pools of orange on the trodden earth. A few last calls of God voyage and farewell until next season echo as traders part ways for the night or for longer journeys. The deep blue of night spreads overhead, and in it shine the same guiding stars that led Vikings across unknown seas. As we retreat from the lively market scenes and merchants' camaraderie, we carry with us a new appreciation for how interconnected the Viking world truly was. They were not just raiders in isolation, they were also bridge builders between cultures. Through them, silks touched northern skin, and northern furs warmed southern nobles. Through them, ideas and art, and even faiths travelled quietly along the trade routes. Having explored how the Vikings traversed the physical world and engaged with many peoples, we will, in the next chapter, step back into the intimate glow of their hearth fires to meet the keepers of their culture, the skalds, poets, the seers, and the living from mice, storytellers who gave voice to their memories and dreams. These were the people who sustained the Vikings' inner world of lore and learning, ensuring that even as they sailed to foreign coasts, the spirit of home and history sailed with them in their songs and sagas. But for now, let us rest like the traders after a long day, letting the gentle lap of distant waves and the low murmur of contented voices lull us into a state of peace. Voyages and settlements. Our story now carries us beyond the familiar Nordic horizon, following the Vikings as they journeyed to new lands and planted fresh roots. Theirs were not only voyages of war, but also of exploration and settlement, chapters of hope and home building in foreign soils. We will travel with them calmly, witnessing how they embraced far shores and made them extensions of their world. First, imagine the misty coast of England in the late 9th century. The tumult of the initial invasions has settled, and in a region known as the Danelaw, Norse families are sowing the seeds of permanent life. It's morning in a village in what is now Yorkshire. The fields glisten with dew as a red sun climbs. A low wisp of smoke drifts from a thatched longhouse into the crisp air. Inside that home, an English woman named Ieda tends the hearth while her Danish husband Gunnar sets out his tools for the day's work. They share a tender glance as they quietly prepare. Years ago, they could not even speak the same language, but now they finish each other's sentences in a mixed tongue that has become their family's own. Outside, small children with light brown hair and grey-blue eyes, a blend of Saxon and Norse, run about chasing geese. Their laughter is identical whether their father calls to them in Norse or their mother in Old English. This is daily life in the Danelaw, once a war zone, now a heartland of integration. Around the village, other farms carry names that echo their mixed heritage. Grimsby, Thoresby, Langthorpe, Norse names attached to English soil. Every barn, every fence erected here was built by hands of two cultures working side by side. In the evenings, perhaps Ida and Gunnar sit by their hearth and trade songs. She teaches him an old Anglo-Saxon hymn. He responds with a gentle Norse folk tune. Over time, even those melodies merge, giving birth to a new local music. What's important is that they have peace, land to call their own, and children to carry their blood into the future. Many such villages dot the Danelaw in this era. The Viking conquerors have become neighbours, and eventually kin to those they once fought. One can see it clearly one mild spring day, as the community comes together to raise the frame of a new barn for a widow. Danes and Saxons alike lift the beams and sing a work song in unison, not caring that half the words are Norse and half English. The meaning is clear enough. Heave, friends, and carry. Together we build. Thus, in these quiet labours, an enduring bond is built that wars can no longer easily sunder. Far to the south, along the sunny rivers of Francia, another metamorphosis occurs. The year is 911. On the bank of the Seine stands a tall Viking warlord, Rollo, flanked by his scarred warriors. Facing them is a delegation of Frankish nobles in rich silks. They meet not in battle, but in a parley. Rollo's steel-grey eyes soften as King Charles the Simple offers him what the Northmen have long craved: land to settle and rule in exchange for peace. They mark the Treaty of St. Clair-sur-Epte with a solemn oath. Rollo kneels with some difficulty and a bit of grumbling humour among his men, and pledges fealty, and the king grants him the Duchy of Normandy, land of the Northmen. Imagine the sense of relief that spreads among all present. The Normans waste no time. Within that very year, these former raiders begin repairing abandoned farms, marrying local women, and even accepting baptism en masse. Decades blur by in our mind's eye. The Northmen's children speak Old French with a Norse accent, and their grandchildren speak it as their mother tongue. The city of Rouen grows bustling under Norman care. A cathedral rises where Rollo once tore down a church in his youth, and now his descendants endow it with gold. Fields that were once scorched by Viking raids now yield grain to feed Viking descendants who know no other home. We visit a Norman village, perhaps a century after Rollo's arrival. It's hard to tell that its ancestors were Danish. The houses look Frankish. The people dress in Frankish fashion. Yet subtle signs remain. The sturdy build of a farmer might hint at northern heritage. A few Norse loanwords linger in the local dialect, and families proudly recount how their great-great-grandfather sailed with Rollo. At a tavern that evening, over spiced wine, the Normans love French wine, unlike their beer-loving forefathers. Villagers swap stories not of Thor and Odin, but of local saints and folk heroes. Still, when a traveller passes through with news of the northern lands, a hush falls and ears perk up. The connection to Scandinavia isn't forgotten. Normans still send gifts to distant cousins in Denmark, and once in a while, a restless youth travels to Norway or Iceland to seek his roots. But overall, Normandy is content and prosperous. In 1066, these Normans, carrying the adventurous spirit of Vikings, but clothed in the refinement of French knights, will cross the sea and conquer England, changing history yet again. But that is a tale for another time. For now, we savour the image of Normandy at peace, apple orchards in bloom. Some say Rollo's men brought in hardy apple stock from home, giving Normandy its famous cider, children laughing in the courtyard of a half-timbered manor, monks illuminating manuscripts in a scriptorium, funded by Norman lords, whose fierce grandfathers never held a quill. The storm has settled into a fruitful calm. Let the scene drift further west now, out into the wide Atlantic, and north to a land of fire and ice. Iceland, around 930 AD. What began with Ingolf's solitary homestead has grown into an island-wide community. We stand at Thingvellir, the assembly plains, on a cool early summer day. A vast natural amphitheatre of green extends before us, bordered by a cliff and bisected by a sparkling river. Tents and booths dot the plain in a great circle. It's the Althing, the annual assembly of all Icelanders. Instead of one king's court, here every free farmer has come, or sends a representative, to make laws and settle disputes by vote and consensus. It's a remarkable experiment in cooperation. Mostly descendants of Vikings from different clans and lands, they have agreed to live under one common set of laws, spoken aloud by an elected law speaker. For days, one can wander the camp and hear debates on property rights, marriage contracts, the schedules of seasonal feasts. There are quarrels, of course, but feuds are tightly managed by arbitration. A young man who started a blood feud years ago stands under a canopy, receiving formal judgment that he must pay a hefty fine of silver to the family of the man he wounded, and in return, he is forgiven. Both families share a ceremonial toast after, ending the cycle of vengeance. 100 years ago in Norway, that might have ended with generations of killings. Here, on this windswept plain, under the wide sky, reason and fairness prevail more often than not. This Icelandic commonwealth thrives without kings, guided by the memory of harsh rule that drove their ancestors to seek freedom here. Notably, as we mentioned earlier, around the year 1000 this Althing chose to adopt Christianity as the land's religion by a vote, largely to prevent schism among themselves. That decision itself is being announced again at this year's meeting. For any who still secretly practice the old ways, they are reminded to baptize their children and attend church or face penalties. Some look sad at that, others relieved, but all agree they must remain one people under one faith. By twilight each day, the assembly becomes a fair. People compete in wrestling matches and horse races on the flat plain. Bards recite verses. One can hear, faintly, a snippet of Egil's saga being recited by a fireside. For it's here at the Althing that many sagas are shared and eventually written, down by curious listeners. The glow of 1,000 campfires reflects off the nearby Uxara River. One can wander freely, welcomed from tent to tent, for smoked lamb or dried fish and ale. There is an easy egalitarian camaraderie that perhaps best fulfills the Viking Age's social ideals. Here, no matter how wealthy or well-born, everyone sleeps under the same stars and answers to the same law. When the assembly disperses, carrying news and new laws back to every far valley of Iceland, they leave a sense of unity across their island. How peaceful the fjords seem now, compared to the warring lands their grandparents fled. The Icelanders even call their new adopted faith Kristni. To them, It's another clan that joined their society, not an outside conqueror. They fold it into their identity and move on. Now let's journey to the very edge of the known world for the Vikings, Greenland. It is about the year 1000, a decade or so after Eric the Red led colonists to this immense, challenging land. In the eastern settlement, near modern Kasiarsuk, a cluster of farmsteads clings to the shores of the fjords. Summer here is brief, but surprisingly green. Grasses and scrubby willows carpet the lower slopes, and wildflowers bob their heads in the brisk sea breeze. A group of Norse Greenlanders is driving their sheep up to higher pasture for grazing, just as their kin in Norway would. The men whistle, and the shaggy sheepdogs herd with practiced skill. A middle-aged woman named Thorbjörg walks slightly apart from the others, scanning the sky. She's listening for something, perhaps the honk of wild geese returning, a sign of summer's peak. Her husband Sivat calls out to her in a teasing tone, "Watching for whales or valkyries, dear?" She laughs and calls back, "Watching for the weather, my love. Someone must be wise here." It's a familiar banter. Sivat still burns with the old Viking thirst for daring. He sometimes leads the five younger men on hunts for seals or polar bears on the ice floes, while Thorbjörg has grown cautious after losing a son to a hunting accident. In Greenland, life is more fragile than in milder lands, so prudence is valued, yet they love this stark, majestic place. When they crest the ridge, they pause to catch their breath and admire the view. The fjord below, dotted with glittering white icebergs drifting out to sea. The mirror-calm water reflecting a late sunset. For in summer, the sun barely sets before midnight here. In that tranquil moment, Sivat rests a hand on Thorbjörg's shoulder and gently points out something on a distant slope. There, two shapes, a caribou cow and calf, move slowly. Even at this distance, they can feel the silent life around them. "We'll be fine here," Sivat says quietly, answering a question Thorbjörg hadn't spoken aloud. She smiles and nods. They will be fine. They have each other, and though Greenland is harsh, it has its gifts. Fat, seals for meat and oil, driftwood and scrub for fires, hardy sheep that grow a marvelously warm wool. Their farm has small turf-walled barns to shelter animals in winter, and a tiny church now too. Just a simple chapel, where a Christian priest, a Greenland-born Norseman who studied in Europe, holds mass occasionally. Beside that chapel, a rune-carved tombstone stands for their son lost to an ice accident. Thorbjörg traces her fingers over the runes lovingly whenever she passes, and finds comfort that his name and memory endure in this land. Greenland's colonies will last about 500 years before climate and isolation overcome them, but in our restful moment, we see them at their height, stubborn, devout, and quietly courageous. At night in Greenland, under a sky alight with aurora borealis, Norse families gather by their hearths and reminisce about the lands they left. Old Asmund, who remembers Eric the Red's charismatic fury, tells the youngsters how mild Norway's winters were compared to these. The children, wrapped in furs, with rosy cheeks from an evening of playing in the snow, find that hard to believe. This is their normal, this beautiful and testing Greenland. They drift to sleep to the lullaby of the wind around their snug turf houses, dreaming perhaps of green fields in some half-remembered homeland they've never seen. In the morning, they'll wake to feed sheep and goats, knead barley bread, and perhaps gather eggs from hardy Icelandic chickens that cluck in the yard. Life goes on, far from the bustle of Europe, but complete in itself. The Greenlanders are proud. When a rare ship arrives from Iceland every few years, they greet it with excitement, but no envy. They have their own law court at Gardar, their own bishop, even by the 12th century, and they know that though small, they are part of Christendom and of the saga of their people. Finally, let us sail even beyond Greenland's fjords, onward to a land the sagas called Vinland, Wineland, known now to lie in Newfoundland, Canada. Picture a sheltered cove on a new coast around the year 1001. The landscape is gently unfamiliar, thick forests of maple and beech, grapevines tangling through underbrush, and grasses taller than a man. A Viking longship lies anchored in a calm bay. On shore, a handful of Norse explorers, led by Leif Erikson, move slowly through the trees, marveling. "Look at this, brothers," Leif whispers, holding up a cluster of wild grapes he's plucked. The berries are purplish and soft, the first grapes any of them have ever seen. One of his companions laughs in disbelief. In Greenland they struggle to grow even hardy turnips in summer, and here is fruit falling off wild vines. Another points out towering trees, likely walnut or oak, straight and thick, far better timber than the stunted pines of Greenland. They can already imagine the value of such wood back home for building halls and churches. The men find an open meadow by a freshwater pond and decide to make camp. For weeks, perhaps months, they live here in Vinland's gentle autumn. We can imagine them going about peaceful routines, felling some trees to repair their ship and to bring back lumber. The sagas say one longship in Greenland had a deck made of Vinland wood, gathering grapes into barrels to ferment a little sweet wine for the voyage home, fishing in a river that teems with salmon larger than any they've seen. The weather is mild, no frost even by what would be late fall in Greenland. They sleep at night under their turned-over boat used as a shelter, listening to unfamiliar noises of the Vinland wilderness. Frogs croaking, wolves howling. They find the wolves here shy, nothing like the aggressive Greenland bears. Leif feels a pang in his heart that this world seems so gentle, and yet he cannot remain. The distance is too great, the ship too small to carry enough settlers to truly colonize. Besides, they have heard signs that the precessed land is inhabited. One day, their scout Thorfinn saw smoke from a far hill, likely the campfire of the native people, the Skrælingjar, who the Norse know to be a different folk with their own ways. They don't wish conflict, and indeed one sunny morning they meet a small band of these natives at the water's edge. There's tension, but Leif, being of calm temperament, sets down his weapons as a show of goodwill and offers a gift, a woolen blanket and a small iron pot, things he guesses might be useful or at least interesting to these people. The locals, cautious but curious, leave a bundle of animal furs on a rock in return and back away. The Norse take the furs fine, sable and beaver, much valued in Europe, and leave more cloth and a bright brass ornament. For a couple of weeks, they exchange goods in this wary but peaceful manner, learning a few words of each other's tongue, even sharing a meal or two with smoked fish and berries. But soon, a misunderstanding leads to a scuffle. Nothing grievous, but enough to make Leif decide they should depart before violence escalates. He knows Vinland is rich, but he values his crew's lives more, and a permanent settlement would surely anger the natives whose land this is. One brisk morning, they pack their ship with timber, furs, dried fish, and as many clusters of grapes as they can stow, and quietly slip away from the beloved shore of Vinland. As the sail fills with a cold northerly wind and the land begins to recede, the Norsemen stand on deck, watching the forests shrink to a dark line on the horizon. None know if they, or anyone, will ever return. Perhaps they murmur a prayer to Njord for a safe return, and to Thor for favourable winds. Their hearts are heavy to leave such abundance, but also light with achievement. They ventured farther than any of their ancestors, and lived to tell of it. In later years, they will speak of Vinland in the halls of Greenland and Iceland, and many will half doubt the tale, until actual timbers and grapes are produced as proof. The farthest chapter of the Viking expansion flickers briefly and then closes, like a candle in a breeze. We have now followed the Vikings to all the lands listed in our voyage: the British Isles, Francia, Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland. In each, we did not dwell on raids or conquests, but on what came after, the quiet normalcy of life reasserting itself. The Vikings, after all, were people, adaptable, hopeful, and ultimately seeking the same comforts as any other: a warm home, a loving family, a secure future for their children. Their migrations and settlements demonstrate that human ability to start anew, to make the foreign familiar. When we look at a map today and see names like Normandy, land of the Northmen, or Rus, land of the rowers, or even Newfoundland, Newfoundland, we are seeing linguistic ghosts of Viking journeys, and scattered across continents are millions of living descendants of those voyagers and settlers. The blood of Norse mingled with Celtic, Slavic, Latin, and indigenous blood, flowing in veins from Yorkshire to Kiev, from Shetland to Normandy, from Iceland to Orkney to Labrador. These descendants would shape kingdoms and cultures long after the Viking Age was technically done. The Normans, of Viking stock, would build castles and cathedrals across Europe. The Norse Gaels, mixed Vikings and Irish, would found cities like Dublin and interweave the Celtic and Nordic artistic styles into something unique and beautiful, as seen in the knotwork of the Book of Kells. The Scandinavian settlers in the British Isles would contribute to the pluralism of England. Many an Englishman today, if he traces his lineage, will find a Danish or Norwegian name perched on a branch of his family tree. Even in North America, DNA studies on the remains of medieval Greenlanders suggest a bit of Native American lineage, evidence that perhaps one of the Vinland natives journeyed back to Greenland and had children there. Thus, the Viking legacy is not only in artifacts and tales, but literally in the flesh and blood of so many of us. Now the sun of this chapter sets, casting long shadows from the masts of our imagined ships and the crosses of our settlers' churches. We have journeyed far beyond the Longships, seeing Vikings not just as warriors, but as fathers, mothers, farmers, traders, human beings striving for a better life in new lands. It leaves one with a sense of warmth toward them, doesn't it? Just as twilight deepens, our respect for their resilience and humanity deepens too. We will next slip into the torchlit halls of Viking society to meet those who gave them their voice, the poets and wise folk, and see how their wisdom was passed down. But for now, let's savor the gentle feeling of connection that comes from walking in their footsteps. The world they touched was vast, yet everywhere they went, they sought the same gentle blessings: fertile land, friendly neighbors, and a future for their children. In that, we can find a kinship that crosses 1,000 years. Keepers of wisdom, skalds and seers, Night has fallen outside, a gentle dark cloaking the Viking village. Inside a great hall, the air is warm and flickers with golden light from a long hearth fire down the center. The hall smells of wood smoke, pine boughs strewn on the floor, and the hearty aroma of mead. Along the walls, families and friends are gathered on benches draped with furs, their faces ruddy in the fire glow. Children lean sleepily against their parents, and warriors unlace their tunics a notch to relax. There is a comfortable hush of expectation. It is storytelling time. At the high seat near the fire stands a skald, a poet of the north, cradling a small harp, or maybe a lyre, on his knee. His eyes gleam with reflection of the flames as he plucks a few notes, a soft, minor melody that hushes the remaining murmurs in the hall. The skald is not young. He has silver threads in his braided beard and scars on his forearms from battles long past. When he speaks, though, his voice is steady and magnetic, carrying the ancient rhythms of poetry. He begins to recite a saga, the epic tale of a legendary hero who journeyed far and suffered much. He doesn't simply tell it, he sings it in a deep, chanting cadence, each line crafted in alliterative verse and rich metaphor. The listeners are transported. Hear how the skald describes a shipwreck. He calls the furious sea Aegir's wild mead, and the floating wreckage the serpent's meal, clever kennings that make the imagery vivid and layered. As he relates the hero's despair washing up alone on foreign shores, even the stoutest warriors in the hall feel a prick of emotion behind their eyes. A log pops in the fire, punctuating the tale, and outside a wind picks up, moaning faintly under the eaves as if the gods themselves listen at the door. Among the audience, a little girl rests her chin on her hands, utterly absorbed. She doesn't comprehend every fancy phrase, but she catches the drift. Bravery, friendship, cunning. Her mother beside her mouths some of the well-known lines along with the skald. For these stories have been told and retold so often that many can recite favorite parts. These are the rules that bind them, not imposed by some distant king or priest, but agreed upon by their ancestors and reaffirmed each year in this very spot. The skald continues to a triumphant part of the saga. The hall erupts in cheers when the hero outwits a giant with a humorous trick. Even the chieftain, sitting in a carved oak chair at the far end, chuckles and raises his horn of mead in salute to the poet. When the saga finally concludes, the hall fills with the sound of appreciative applause. Not the loud clapping we know today, but people thumping their fists softly on tables or chests in approval, and a few voices crying, "Skål," cheers. The skald bows, a hand on his heart, and takes a long draught of mead offered by a serving maid. He has earned his welcome and his supper tonight. In fact, such poets are highly prized guests in any lord's hall. A skilled skald can expect rich gifts, perhaps a fine cloak, or an armring of silver, for weaving words so beautifully. More than that, he earns a place in the community's heart. Long after he's departed to the next farm, or sailed to the next settlement, people here will be quoting his clever lines and chuckling anew, or finding strength in a verse he sang about endurance in hardship. In an age without ink and parchment readily available, the skalds are the living libraries, and their poetry the treasury of culture. The fire is banked a bit now, glowing coals casting a softer light. Many children have been carried off to bed, eyes already closed, heads lolling on their father's shoulders as they were taken to their sleeping benches. But a few adults remain by the fire pit, and into this quieter circle steps another respected figure, the seeress. Unlike the vibrant, story-weaving skald. She projects an ethereal aura of stillness and mystery. She is an elderly woman, wrapped in a dark blue cloak embroidered with odd symbols. In her hand, she carries a slender staff carved with runes. The remaining audience grows respectful and silent at her approach. Even the chieftain rises and offers his own seat for her, which she accepts with a nod. This woman is a vulva, a seer, consulted in times of uncertainty. Tonight, the community has asked her to perform a small prophecy, to bless the coming spring planting, and perhaps glimpse what fortunes or misfortunes lie ahead in the next season. She begins by humbly requesting the aid of the spirits. Her voice is low and melodious as she chants an ancient invocation. The language of her song is old, perhaps an archaic Norse or a special chant language, and its meaning is cryptic, but its effect is undeniable. The listeners feel a chill, not of cold, but as though some unseen breeze has passed through their souls. One by one, the women of the hall join in softly with a chorus of hums and vowel sounds, supporting the vulva's song. This chorus, called Vardlokkur, is said to help lift her spirit into the other world. The men mostly bow their heads or watch in sober silence. It is known that women, and especially mature women, hold the domain of this particular magic. The firelight plays on the seeress's closed eyes and tranquil face. After several long minutes of chanting, she falls quiet and very still. Those nearby swear later that they felt a presence in the hall at that moment, as if some formless visitor stepped through the smoky rafters to stand at the vulva's side. In the silence, one could hear the faint hoot of an owl outside. Then the seeress speaks. In a soft, measured voice, one not quite like her conversational tone, she offers her vision. She says that she sees the crops growing well this year. The barley, taller than a man's waist, by summer's end. Smiles and nods greet this news. But she cautions of an early autumn storm. It would be wise to bring the herds down from the high pasture a week sooner than usual. She also speaks directly to the chieftain. There is an image of a skipped stone in her mind. He should not send his eldest son on that trading voyage planned next year, for it may result in the son not returning. The chieftain's face grows solemn, but he inclines his head in thanks for the warning. To a young married couple huddled together for the prophecy, she brings glad tidings. She sees a healthy babe in blankets and the ring of silver on the child's arm, meaning a naming ceremony. Indeed, the wife blushes, having suspected she might be with child. None of these revelations are overly dramatic or doom-laden. Contrary to some beliefs, a vulva often focused on the practical and hopeful. She sprinkles in a few spiritual bits as well. She assures everyone that Freya and Frigg, goddesses of love and home, have been watching over the village, pleased with how well people care for one another here. Her message given, the seeress gradually returns to herself, as if waking from a light sleep. The chieftain gently places a silver coin in her palm as thanks, and earlier that day, a bed was prepared for her, and a fine meal served. She will leave in the morning honored and well rested. The hall breathes out. Many hadn't realized they were holding their breath during the prophecy. Now, conversations pick up quietly as people discuss the advice, already planning to heed it. The pregnant wife is embraced by her mother. The farmer from the uplands nods to his brother that they'll move the sheep earlier this year, just in case. The vulva's words carry weight, though the new Christian priests tut at such pagan practices. Even some secretly respect these wise women and the comfort they provide. In isolated communities, facing the brute forces of nature, a reassuring vision or counsel, even if mystical in packaging, can boost morale and unity. As the last embers of the fire crumble into ash, a final figure by the hearth picks up a small bone flute. It is the skald again, or maybe a young apprentice of his. He plays a gentle lullaby, a tune known to all. The notes are soft and lilting, like a boat bobbing on calm water. Those remaining hum along or listen with eyes closed, each perhaps saying a personal prayer to whatever gods they hold dear. Odin, Christ, Thor, Mary. As the day ends, the lullaby is about safe harbor and guardian spirits. It has no words now, only the simple melody passed parent to child over generations. In that moment, we see how song and story in the Viking world are as vital as bread and ale. They nourish the spirit, connect the people to their ancestors and each other, and help make sense of a world that can be both beautiful and cruel. We leave the hall as the people within drift off to their beds. Overhead, the night sky is brilliant with stars. A half-moon peeks through the smoke hole of the hall's roof, as if curious to eavesdrop on the dreams forming inside. Perhaps one man sleeps and dreams of the saga's hero, and in his dream, he is that hero, overcoming his own trials. Perhaps a child dreams of the wise Volva's calm voice and sees kindly goddesses scattering flowers over the fields of their village. These dreams, born from the evening's tales and prophecies, weave themselves into the fabric of Viking consciousness. By dawn, the stories and songs will gently begin their next cycle. Maybe the farmer will whistle the lullaby tune while milking cows, or a mother will remind her son of the skald's verse about courage when he is afraid to gather wood in the dark forest. Thus the wisdom carries on like an unbroken thread. In this chapter, we have sat among the Vikings at their fireside and felt the warmth, not just of the flames, but of their culture. We have seen that beyond warriors, they were poets. Beyond raiders, they were philosophers of a homespun sort. Their values, honor, loyalty, the transience of life, and the endurance of reputation, were enshrined in the Havamal, the sayings of the High One, and other poems, memorized and quoted by young and old. Cattle die, kinsmen die, but the fame of one's good deeds never dies, says one such proverb. And around the hall at night, one can believe they truly live by it. Now, having shared in their songs and counsel, we shall ready ourselves to witness one more essential facet of their society, how they governed themselves, the laws and principles that held their communities together. But before we move on, take a moment to imagine the fading notes of that flute echoing in the timber rafters and out into the starry night. In the quiet that follows, there lingers a sense of continuity, that through story, music, and ritual, the Vikings kept continuity with their ancestors and provided guidance for their descendants, creating a gentle immortality for their wisdom. The circle of law, things, and honor. Under a bright summer sky, in a natural amphitheater formed by gently sloping hills, the community gathers for the thing, the assembly of the free people. The air is filled with the sound of many conversations. Farmers greeting neighbors they haven't seen since last season. Chieftains' followers murmuring together. Children chasing one another between clumps of heather, while their parents shush them intermittently. It is a day of both business and reunion, almost festive, were it not for the serious matters at hand. At the center of the gathering stands a large flat stone, the law rock, and upon it steps an imposing figure, the law speaker. He is an elderly man with a voice as clear as a bell. When he raises his arms, a respectful quiet spreads over the crowd. All can see him. His simple wool cloak is fastened with a silver pin that glints in the sun, a mark of his esteemed office. "Hear me, people of the North Valley," his voice rings out. He begins by reciting, from memory, a section of the law, perhaps about property boundaries or inheritance rules, so that everyone can hear it spoken aloud. In an age with little written law, the law speaker's recitation is how the law lives. The crowd listens attentively. Many mouth the familiar words along with him. They've heard these edicts at each thing since they were children. Once the formal recitations end, the assembly moves on to disputes that need settling. Now the scene resembles an open-air court. Two farmers stand before the law rock, voices raised but controlled. They have a quarrel over a pasture where their sheep mingle. Each presents his side, while the law speaker and a circle of respected elders listen. One farmer, Halldór, insists the pasture is his by ancient right. The other, Ulf, claims Halldór's grandfather gave his grandfather joint grazing permission decades ago. The talk goes back and forth, occasionally eliciting chuckles from the audience when a witty remark slips out. But there is no fighting. Both men know that to draw steel at the thing is a grave offense to the gods of order and will get them outlawed on the spot. Instead, they rely on persuasion, witness testimony. Ulf's elderly aunt totters forward to swear she remembers the agreement and the guiding hand of the law speaker. After some deliberation, the elders confer with the law speaker, and a verdict is pronounced. Ulf shall keep a right to graze a certain number of sheep on the contested pasture, but he must gift Halldór 2 good lambs each spring, as acknowledgement that the land itself belongs to Halldór's family. This compromise satisfies both. Ulf feels recognized. Halldór retains ownership, and the exchange of lambs will ensure they maintain a cordial relationship. The crowd murmurs approval. Such compensation and compromise are the lifeblood of Viking justice. Rather than harsh punishment, the goal is often to restore balance and peace in the community. There are cases of serious wrongdoing too. A hush falls as a young man is brought forward, accused of theft of valuable tools from a smith. He looks frightened, and for good reason. Theft is not lightly forgiven. The thing finds, after evidence, including the tools found hidden in his barn, that he is guilty. The law speaker formally declares him an outlaw, meaning the community withdraws its protection from him. Gasps and sadness ripple through the onlookers, for this is a dire sentence. To be outlawed is essentially a death of one's social identity. Anyone may harm him without penalty, and he must leave the region by a certain time or face worse. The thief's mother quietly weeps into her shawl. The young man himself goes pale as chalk. But none openly object. All know the law, and all agree that some crimes, especially those showing neither cowardice or deep dishonor, cannot be tolerated if trust is to hold among neighbors. The assembly disperses for a break after this, allowing emotions to settle. A few kindly folk approach the thief's mother to console her. Even in stern justice, these people temper it with human empathy. Perhaps the boy will find refuge in another district or across the sea. Exile may yet teach him honor, and in time, maybe he can be quietly allowed to return if he proves himself changed. The Vikings' laws can be rigid, but they are not without mercy. One remarkable aspect of Viking law is its democratic spirit. Here at the Thing, each free farmer, male or female, women of standing, can and do speak up through male relatives, or occasionally on their own, has a voice. No king or noble can simply dictate. Even great jarls must sway the crowd with reason and charisma. In the circle of the thing, all free people are, in theory, equals coming together to govern themselves. We see a vivid example when a matter of community decision arises. The elders propose building a second footbridge over the river to ease travel. A debate ensues from all sides. One man argues it's a waste of labor when a ford is nearby. A woman counters that, during spring floods, the ford is impassable and the bridge would save lives. A third voice jests that the only ones who don't want a bridge are trolls, who dislike the sound of trip-trapping feet. Laughter follows. Eventually, a voice vote is held, and the yeas clearly win. The bridge will be built come summer. Those who dissented shrug and accept the outcome. They know well the old saying, with many counselors, one's plan is made sure. The Norse trust in collective wisdom, even if it may override personal preference. Amid these practical matters, the thing is also a social event. Between sessions, people stroll among vendors who have set up impromptu stalls around the field. There's a farmer selling honey cakes and ale, a weaver displaying bright woolen ribbons. Many a thing witness ends the day with a new adornment on their hat or cloak, and children running around, playing games with sticks and leather balls. Friendships are rekindled. Marriages are arranged in hushed discussions between families under a birch tree's shade, and gossip is exchanged. Who had a good harvest? Whose daughter is betrothed to whom? The law speaker himself might be seen sharing a meal with a poor crofter, listening to local concerns that never make it to formal cases. In this way, the thing is the heartbeat of the community, a time when the scattered farms become, for a day or two, one big village. Honor is a word on everyone's lips at the thing. Though it may not be spoken loudly, it underpins all that happens here. Honor, one's personal reputation for integrity and courage, is the moral currency that buys you respect and fair hearing. When disputes are resolved, it is not just about property or compensation, but about restoring honor to all sides. Consider the two farmers earlier. Had the verdict utterly shamed one of them, there would linger a grudge. By crafting a solution where each man's pride is intact, one yields land, but gains lambs and acknowledgement. The other gains grazing, but still pays respect. The thing has prevented a feud and preserved the honor of both. Feuds, in fact, are the great fear, a cycle of retaliation that can tear apart families for generations. That is why the community works so hard here, to settle matters with finality. The worst mark on a person is to be called neathing, dishonorable. Such a person, known for lies or cowardice, will find no support at the thing and may as well not attend at all, so scorned would his voice be. On the other hand, someone like the law speaker, regarded as wise and upright, holds immense sway with just a few calm words. In a famous example of the thing's role in preserving social harmony, we recall the tale from Iceland's Althing around the year 1000. The settlers of Iceland were fiercely divided. Half still worshipped the old gods, and half had been converted to Christianity by missionaries. Tempers ran hot. There was real fear that the island would split into warring factions. What did they do? They entrusted their law speaker, Thorgeir Thorkelson, with deciding the matter. It's said Thorgeir took a day and night to meditate in silence beneath a fur blanket. The next morning, he stood before the Althing and announced a compromise. Iceland would be a Christian land, one law for all, one religion to unite them. But for the time being, pagan sacrifices could continue in private. and those who still quietly honored Odin or Freya would not be punished. This pragmatic solution prevented a schism. The people, though it was hard for some, accepted it for the greater good of peace. Thorgeir himself, a pagan, cast his wood idols into a waterfall to lead by example. In that act, he sacrificed personal belief for social concord. Such was the power of the thing's collective decision and the wisdom of its chosen law speaker. As the sun starts to lower westward and the thing's business comes to an end, the assembly concludes with a final proclamation of the law and a prayer for prosperity until the next meeting. People begin drifting back to their horses and carts. You can hear snatches of songs as they depart. Someone is singing a verse about the good old laws that keep us free. A group of young men ride off, laughing and racing one another in good-natured competition, maybe to blow off steam after the serious hours. An old couple walks slowly, arm in arm, discussing the day's events. It was a just outcome for those farmers, says the wife. Aye, replies the husband. Balance was kept. Above, a pair of ravens, symbol of Odin, who among his many roles is the god of wisdom and witness to oaths, circle the field as if to inspect that all was done rightly. Then they fly off toward the woods. We find ourselves reflecting that in this Viking world, often characterized as rowdy and lawless, there is in fact a strong backbone of order and principle. It comes not from prisons and constant surveillance, but from a shared cultural commitment to fairness, reputation, and community consensus. In the absence of centralized government, the Vikings developed these things, local and regional assemblies, to govern themselves. It was at a thing that kings could be elected or deposed, where alliances were formed, where trade agreements were sanctioned and marriages approved. Everyone, from the highest jarl to the humblest yeoman, stood beneath the same open sky and listened to the same law. In our modern mind, we might romanticize it, but indeed, there was something profoundly egalitarian in this practice, a seed of democratic thinking taking root in Dark Age soil. As we ride away from the Thingfield with the departing crowd, we carry with us the assurance that the Viking society, for all its fierceness, rested on a foundation of agreed rules and a longing for fierce stability. Their world could be violent, yes, but they deeply valued peaceful resolutions, every blood feud resolved. Every fair verdict at a thing was a victory of civilization over chaos. The next time the community faces a conflict, they will recall today's outcomes and know that meeting in council is better than meeting with swords on the field of battle. In the fading light, families heading home feel relieved. Justice was done, problems were solved, and they can return to their farms with lighter hearts. Evening falls, casting long shadows from the standing stones of the Law Rock, now left alone in the empty field. The breeze that rustles through the grasses seems to whisper the law speaker's words one last time to the land itself. And we journey on with our understanding enriched. The Vikings, often remembered for might, also lived by right, by law and honor, that kept human society woven together even amid harsh winds and hard times. In our next and final chapter, we will watch as one more great change sweeps their world, the gentle dawning of a new faith and the legacy the Northmen left behind for future ages. For now, let the echoes of the thing remind us that even in a rugged age, fairness and fellowship were cherished, lighting the way like a hearth fire on a cold night. A new dawn, from Odin's temple to Christian church. A soft mist lies over a Norse village at daybreak, sometime in the early 11th century. In the center of the village stands a new building, unlike the old longhouses, a small wooden stave church. Its wooden beams are carved with intertwining designs of vines and strange beasts that subtly blend Viking art with Christian symbols. Atop its roof, instead of a dragon's head, a simple cross reaches toward the brightening sky. The bell has just rung, a gentle wooden clapper sounding tonk, tonk through the morning air, calling the faithful to worship. Villagers emerge from their homes, much as they would have for a thing or a feast in years past. But now they walk in pairs and families toward the church. There is a feeling of calm and hope. Leading the way is the local priest, himself born a Norse farmer's son, now wearing a robe of undyed wool and a cross pendant. His hair is still long in the old style, but he has a kindly, youthful face that radiates patience. He greets each person by name as they file inside. "Good morning, Thorstein. And you, Sigrid. How is that new baby?" The people smile and respond respectfully. They still stumble over the Latin Dominus vobiscum, "The Lord be with you," but they trust this man, who speaks of peace and forgiveness. Inside the church, the familiar scent of wood smoke mingles with new scents of beeswax, candles and pine branches laid on the floor for the holy day. Sunlight streams through a small window, illuminating an altar where once perhaps a wooden idol of Thor or Freya might have stood in a different setting. Now a painted icon of Mary and the Christ child, brought by traders from the south, graces the shrine. It's simple but captivating. Mary's face is gentle, and in her eyes, the villagers see a reflection of their own mother's comforting gaze. The congregation gathers, men on one side, women on the other, as is the custom now. Among them are grey-haired folks who once prayed to Odin. They still murmur an old appeal to him under their breath out of habit when they need strength. But in public, they have embraced the sign of the cross. They have come to feel that the white Christ of the missionaries might not be so different from Balder the Good, and Mary's compassion reminds them of Frigg's motherly care, parallels that help them accept the new faith in their hearts. As the priest begins the Mass in a mix of Latin and the Norse tongue, a tranquility settles. Latin chant fills the tiny space. The villagers do their best to join the responses, their rough voices rising and falling with the ancient melody. Outside, a pair of swallows nesting in the eaves take flight at the sound, circling the church as if to carry the hymn to the heavens. Through the open door, one can see the standing runestone in the churchyard. It was raised by a family in honor of their father who died years ago, and notably, carved into its runic inscription is a small cross, evidence of the Tamil blending of old ways with new. Indeed, many runestones in this era bear both runes and crosses, a foot in each world. The priest's sermon today is about loving one's enemies and caring for the poor, messages that resonate with these hardy folk who have seen enough of blood feuds and hardship. Some recall bitter fights from their youth, clan against clan, and how much was lost. They nod quietly, stroking their beards or clutching their shawls, thinking how much better life can be now that such feuds are largely buried and vengeance is left to God alone. As the priest teaches, not far from the church stands an old grove of oak trees that was once sacred to Thor. It still is, in a way. No one cut it down during the conversion of this village. Instead, the priest held a prayer there, asking that the one true God hallow the old grove anew. Now villagers sometimes walk through those venerable oaks while reciting the Pater Noster, Our Father, or an Ave Maria. They say they can feel the presence of the divine, just as their grandparents did when they offered sacrifices there. Only now, instead of sprinkling horse blood, they leave a small wooden cross tied to a branch, or simply bask in the stillness, believing God made these trees and loves them. It was a gentle conversion here. In some places, yes, harsh kings like Olaf Tryggvason forced Norway to its knees, toppling god-pillars and threatening stubborn pagans with sword or fire. But even those stories often note that once the deed was done, there was peace and people adapted quickly. And in other regions, like much of Denmark or Iceland, it went relatively peacefully by decision of leaders or community vote. The practical Northmen decided, "We shall all follow one law, one faith, so we do not tear ourselves apart." And so they did, sometimes with heavy hearts for the old gods, but with forward-looking resolve. Back inside the little church, Mass concludes with a blessing in Norse. May the Almighty God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit bless and keep you. The villagers respond with a heartfelt Amen, some making the sign of the cross in the air clumsily. As they file out, each dips a hand in the stone baptismal font by the door and makes a cross on their chest. A ritual now as customary as touching a Thor's hammer pendant was a generation ago. In that very font, only a week prior, the newborn son of Gunnar and Astrid was baptized. The baby was given the Christian name John, though his parents also quietly call him Thorleif at home, in honor of a beloved pagan grandfather. There is no harm in that. The priest understands. Old beloved names and customs persist, so long as they do not contradict the new faith's core. In fact, many seasonal festivals have simply been repurposed rather than abolished. The joyful midwinter Yule feast, with its evergreens and feasting, is now the celebration of Christ's birth. Christmas, though the families still light the Yule log and tell stories deep into the night, as always. Spring's Thing-Time gathering coincides with Easter. They hunt eggs and rejoice at the returning light, seeing in it the resurrection promise. The harvest block to Freya has transformed into a thanksgiving mass for a bountiful year, followed by the familiar communal feast. Now the roast boar might be dedicated to Street, Michael instead of Freya, but to the farmers enjoying the savoury meat and good ale, the difference is slight. Change in the north happens slowly, by degrees, woven into the fabric of what came before. We step back and observe the broader picture. By 1100, Scandinavia is fully Christianized in the official sense. Kings like Harald Bluetooth of Denmark proudly set up massive runestones, proclaiming, "Made the Danes Christian." Churches and monasteries appear in towns that once hosted only heathen shrines. The last Viking raids are a fading memory, as Christian kings forge tighter bonds with the rest of Gry, medieval Europe. Scandinavian merchants can travel safely to other Christian lands and be greeted as brothers in faith, at least in theory. Trading rivalries don't vanish overnight. Latin literacy begins to bloom. In quiet scriptoriums, perhaps a monk who is the grandson of a Viking warrior is now copying the Gospels onto parchment in beautifully wrought letters, preserving knowledge and also inadvertently preserving Viking lore, since soon others will begin writing down those old oral sagas. Indeed, it is thanks to Christian-era writers in Iceland that the exploits of Thor and Odin, of Ragnar and Egil, were eventually recorded for us to know. The Vikings, by becoming Christian, entered history's written record more fully, not only as subjects of other nations' chronicles, but as authors of their own. For the common folk, the transformation of daily life was subtle but meaningful. The violent practice of burying slaves or wives with a dead chieftain gradually ceased. Christianity taught the dignity of each soul and the hope of reunion in heaven, eliminating the perceived need for such cruel send-offs. Instead, grave goods became simpler, more symbolic, a sword perhaps, but now laid in a churchyard under the protection of a cross, not on a distant barrow where Draugr, restless dead, lurked. The notion of one loving God watching over all brought comfort in the long, dark winters. While once a farmer might have worried that a vengeful ghost or land spirit could blight his crop if offended, now he might kneel in the furrows and pray for Christ's blessing on the seedlings, trusting in a divine plan rather than placating unseen elves. Though truth be told, many a farmer still left a small offering of milk at the far corner of the field, just in case. The landvatir, land spirits, still appreciated it. The old gods did not vanish overnight in hearts. For a few generations, people whispered old oaths in secret. Grandmothers taught grandchildren to respect the vatir of house and barn, saying, "Don't anger the little folk," even as they also taught them the Lord's Prayer. But gradually, the lore of Odin, Thor, Freya, and the rest slipped into the realm of legend rather than religion. They became characters in stories rather than objects of worship. Some lived on in folk traditions. Thor's name, for instance, lingered in the day Thursday, and people still remarked that he was swinging his hammer when thunder rolled. But they now knew it was only an expression, in the same way we today might speak of Zeus's lightning without literally believing it. The world moved on. What did not change was the hardy, independent spirit of the Norse. Christianity softened certain edges. It encouraged forgiveness over vengeance, humility over prideful boast, cooperation under a universal church over clan-based division. But the essence of these people, their love of adventure, their frank speech, their work, ethic, and love of family, remained. We imagine a scene in a Norwegian fjord around 1050. A convent of nuns is being established near a fishing village. The nuns are mostly women of the local nobility, educated and gentle, come to teach healing and the faith. The village girls curiously watch the nuns sing Gregorian chant in the chapel, a sound so ethereal compared to their mothers' hummed lullabies. And yet, when one of the nuns steps out and speaks kindly to them in Norse, asking if they'd like to learn letters, the girls find that the nun's smile and their mother's smile are much alike. The values of compassion and courage are common to both the old and new ways. Over time, the girls will learn to read and perhaps join the convent or marry Christian husbands, and their children will grow up never knowing a time without the sign of the cross. The Viking Age ends not with an apocalyptic battle, but with a quiet sunrise on a Christian north where the Longships rest at. Anchor and the marauders have become merchants and farmers under the gentle watch of the church spire. Our journey through this transforming era leaves us with a sense of calm resolution. The fierce winds that once drove the dragon-proud ships on lightning raids have settled into the steady breeze that turns the windmills of monasteries and carries the sound of church bells across old battlefields now green with grass. As we prepare to consider the lasting legacy of the Vikings in our final chapter, we feel the truth of a saying often attributed to those times. Times change, and we with them. The Norse adapted and evolved, ushering in a new dawn that would illuminate their world in a different light. Yet, as we shall see, they also left indelible marks on the world. marks that endure quietly, like footprints in stone, to this very day. Let us set our eyes on that horizon. What became of the Vikings' spirit after the storm of the age passed? And how do echoes of their lives still resonate in ours? Echoes, over the ages, the Viking legacy. Our long journey with the Vikings draws to a close, but their presence lingers all around us in subtle ways. In the quiet of a modern dawn, if you know where to look, you can find gentle echoes of the Northmen's lives woven into ours. Picture an early morning in the English countryside. A light fog clings to rolling green fields. Along an old stone wall runs a narrow lane leading to a village called Thorpeby, a name whose syllables come straight from Old Norse Thorp, meaning farm hamlet, and by, meaning village. As the village awakens, a baker opens his shop, perhaps without realizing that the word baker has cousins in Old Norse, and children prepare for school on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, each day silently bearing the name of a Norse god: Tyr, Odin, Woden, Thor, and Freya. Centuries after those deities ceased to be worshipped, the echoes are everywhere. They're in the very language we speak. When you gaze up at the wide blue sky, thank the Norse who gave us that word, from Old Norse ski, meaning cloud. If you enjoy a hearty steak or break an egg for breakfast, you're speaking Norse without knowing it. Hundreds of everyday English words: window, wind-eye, husband, houseband, happy, law, knife, take, have Viking origins, quietly reminding us of those long ago people every time they roll off our tongues. Now imagine walking through the city of York in northern England on a sleepy Sunday. The streets are quiet, shops shuttered. You might turn a corner and find yourself by a section of old stone wall, or the foundations of a timber building displayed under glass. A plaque informs you that this was once Jorvik, the thriving Viking town beneath your feet. The very layout of York's central streets, those short, crooked lanes called gates, from Old Norse gata, street, follows the pattern set down in Viking days. When locals say Miklagate or Coppergate, they unwittingly speak Norse. In some streets, archaeologists have found wooden beams and posts deep underground, preserved in waterlogged soil that were cut and placed by Viking hands. The city hums with modern life now, the aroma of fresh coffee, the rumble of a distant bus. But beneath and around it, the Viking legacy is like a comfortable, unseen layer. Once a year, York celebrates a Viking festival where residents and visitors dress in furs and helmets, harmless play helmets with no real danger, and reenact those times. By candlelight, they listen to skaldic tales and the music of lyres, reviving the old spirit in a friendly carnival. The fact that communities across the world, from York to villages in Norway, from Dublin to far-flung Vinland, Newfoundland in Canada, where Lanso Meadows shows the remains of a Viking encampment, still remember the Vikings so fondly shows how enduring their imprint is. Travel across the North Sea in our mind's eye to Scandinavia itself. In a quiet Norwegian fjord, the water lies still and dark, reflecting steep, pine-clad mountains. At the fjord's end stands a graceful stave church, its wooden silhouette, the descendant of those early churches we saw the Vikings build. In its architecture, if you look closely, you notice carvings of dragons on the roof peaks and serpentine designs entwined around doorways. Those are vestiges of Viking art, intentionally incorporated into holy places, as a way to sanctify the familiar. Outside the church, a weathered rune stone stands as a guardian. Its runic letters are still visible. Perhaps it says something like, "In memory of Håkon, son of Ulfric, a just man and brave in battle." Villagers stroll by on their way to Sunday service, greeting each other with warm smiles. They may no longer read runes, but the stone is not neglected. A small bouquet of wildflowers rests at its base, placed there by school children learning about their heritage. All across Scandinavia, from Sweden's wide plains to Denmark's gentle coasts, you find these rune stones, burial mounds, and even remnants of longships, now in museums. Silent testaments that the people who live here today are descendants of those we have journeyed with through this narrative. In their blood and culture flow the values of both the Viking Age and all the eras that followed. Consider also the political and legal legacy. The Viking thing, that open-air assembly of free people, can be seen as a forebear of modern democratic gatherings. In the languages of the North, the word thing evolved. In English, the early medieval husting, from house thing, house assembly, was a council, and today, the Icelandic parliament is still called Alþingi, Althing, as it was in 930. In Tynwald, on the Isle of Man, and in the Channel Island of Guernsey, annual public assemblies with roots in Viking rule persist to this day, complete with ceremonial readings of laws in the open air. Whenever citizens convene to solve problems together in a town meeting or parliament, one might whimsically imagine an ancestor of the Viking thing, the principle that people have a voice, faintly smiling on that process. And what of exploration? The Viking spirit of adventure carried humanity's footprint farther. They paved the way, or rather, rode the way, across the Atlantic to North America, long before Columbus. Although their Vinland colony was brief, it opened the imaginative possibility that lands lay beyond the Western Ocean. In Greenland, their tenuous settlements for 500 years proved humans could live in the harsh Arctic through courage and adaptability, a lesson not lost on later Arctic explorers. In the east, the routes blazed by the Varangians down the Dnieper and Volga became pathways for trade and cultural exchange that enriched both Europe and the Islamic world. Even today, the city of Kiev, once a Viking-ruled town, and Moscow, later influenced by Norse-descended rulers, indirectly owe parts of their heritage to those river-crossing Vikings. The very name Russia likely comes from the Rus, a Norse tribe. So every time we say Russia, we speak a word of Viking origin, a linguistic artifact of their travels. Culturally, too, the Vikings live on in subtler forms. The heroic sagas and Eddas they composed have inspired countless writers and artists. Tolkien's Middle-earth, with its wanderers, dwarves, and runic inscriptions, borrows heavily from Norse mythology. The days of our week, as we noted, keep the Norse gods in global collective memory. Modern Scandinavian languages, Swedish, Danish, Norwegian, Icelandic, are direct continuations of Old Norse, adjusted by time, but still clear to the ancient ear. An Icelander today can pick up a 13th century saga in the original language and, with a little effort, understand it, a living bridge to the Viking Age mind. There's a gentle irony in how some of the most cherished ideals of the Viking Age, bravery, loyalty, independence, found new life within Christian and later humanist frameworks in Scandinavia. The once fearsome Vikings became diligent farmers, traders, lawmakers, and eventually, in the case of the Normans, nation builders. Rollo's descendants in Normandy blended Norse vigor with French culture to give us knights and castles, and eventually, the Norman conquest of England, which changed medieval history. Meanwhile, in the north, Viking-descended kings like Sweden's Gustav Vasa or Norway's late medieval rulers fostered national identities that still celebrate Viking folklore as part of their tapestry. Viking imagery, the longship, the horned mythical helmet, the rune, has become a proud emblem in Nordic countries, not as a sign of war, but of heritage and unity. Every year in late January, the Shetland Islanders, whose lineage is half Norse, hold up Heli a festival where a replica longship is burned amid songs and celebration, not to glorify violence, but to strengthen community through shared history, warming themselves by the same flames that once lit their ancestors' feasts. As we step back and look at our own lives, we might be surprised at how often we encounter faint ripples from the Viking Age in our daily routines. Perhaps you drive on a road that was once a Roman causeway, but later used by Norse traders to reach inland markets. Or maybe your hometown has a name like Eastby, or Normanton, or Odensthorpe, quietly signifying the farm by the east, or the settlement of Northmen, or Thor's village. If you ever participated in a thing without even knowing it, for instance, a local council meeting or a moot court in law school, you were partaking in a tradition the Vikings helped popularize, gathering free people to discuss and decide. And always, when Wednesday rolls around, know that Wednesday literally means Woden's Day, an invisible tribute to Odin, riding across the middle of our work week. Finally, beyond tangible legacies of language or law, there is an intangible but profound inheritance from the Vikings, a spirit of adventure and resilience. It's in the human love for the sea and what lies beyond the horizon. Every time an explorer sets sail for uncharted waters, or even when a scientist ventures into new realms of knowledge, one could poetically say, a bit of that Viking boldness lives on. They showed that it's possible to journey to the edge of the known world and come back with stories, and perhaps a new trading partner. They demonstrated adaptability, how to settle in foreign lands and make them home, how to take what is useful from new cultures, a religion, a technology like the saddle or the plough, and improve one's life with it. These are quiet lessons, etched not in stone, but in the collective human experience. Now the sun sets on our travels in time. The long twilight of a Nordic summer evening extends, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. As you find yourself once more in the present, perhaps listening in the comfort of your bed or armchair, you carry with you bits of the Viking story. Maybe you'll remember, as you drift to sleep, the image of a lone longship cutting across a glassy fjord at dawn, or a family gathered by the hearth sharing mead and myths. Perhaps you'll feel a newfound kinship with those distant people, recognizing in their loves and labors our own. The Vikings' world was not so unlike ours in the most human ways. They raised children, sought meaning in the stars, cherished friends, and endured losses, all under the same sun and moon that shine on us. The night deepens. In your mind's ear, you might still hear the soft strum of a lyre or the whisper of the wind through a birch grove where a runestone stands. Let those gentle sounds reassure you that history is not lost. It lives on in us, quietly guiding our languages, our customs, and the very fabric of our societies. We have journeyed far and wide, from fjords to far isles, from mead hall to church altar. Now it is time to rest, as the Vikings themselves would, after a long day of rowing, or a long night of storytelling, may the spirit of the North watch over your dreams. In the old tongue, they might say, "Sof thu rot," sleep softly. The tumult of battles and waves is now long past. What remains is the calm afterglow of understanding. We bid good night to the saga of the Vikings, thankful for the insights and peace it has given us. And as you close your eyes, remember that you too are part of this ever-flowing story of humanity, connected across time by the whispers of heritage and cradled, as were the Northmen of old, by the enduring rhythms of the earth and sky.